Yeah, and there's six of us in this band, so that makes scheduling kind of difficult, especially running the gamut of ages that we have from like 46, which me to a young boy of Sam. I think he's like 27 or something like that, and some of that
Yeah.
blows my mind, man.
There's
And
some interesting conversations in the tour van, because the rage of ages. Yeah,
yeah, man.
a lot of pro wrestling talk between him and our drummer, the oldest and the youngest guy in the van. That was interesting.
Yeah, I'm the one that used to watch pro wrestling when I was younger, and he's the one that wrestles. So I mean, we talk about that all the time.
Well, as soon as you said November to Dismember, I was thinking ECW.
ECW, yeah.
Greetings, friends, and welcome to episode 159 of Into the Necrosphere, the final installment of the podcast for 2022 before I jet off to South Africa to drink all of their red wine, do a massive amount of damage to the domestic meat supply, and generally wind down and enjoy my Christmas with my family. But I did promise that I was going to go out on a high, and I believe that I have delivered by way of this week's guests, Will Smith and Rick Habeeb of Reeking Aura. Their fantastic new record, Blood and Bonemeal, is out now on Profound Law Records. I've spoken about it on the podcast before. I raved about it on the podcast, and it was great to be able to catch up with them and find out more about how the band got started. We also discussed some of the other musical projects that they're involved in. We discussed the podcast that Will runs alongside Rick and a host of others. And we also spoke a little bit about their individual hometown scenes as they were growing up and finding their feet, musically speaking. So fascinating conversation with two great guys from a fantastic band, which is potentially on the list of contenders for my top 30 of 2022. But as I said many times on the show previously, I am not going to be releasing that list until early next year, and the reason for that may be found in this week's review candidate. Veilburner have just put out their self-titled record. I will be telling you my thoughts on that straight after the conversation with Will and Rick, and then of course I will also be delivering one last news rant. This week I know that we've got a new Obituary track to listen to. There's been a fair few other, I think maybe smaller, more underground bands putting out music, so we will no doubt have lots to talk about as we set the world to rights on Metal Storm and Blabbermouth, the Democrats' Guide to Rock Music. So that's going to be coming your way at the very end of the show. Stick around for that. If you are new to the podcast, make sure that you elbow drop the subscribe button on your platform of choice. Follow me on social media and check out the Into the Necrosphere Teespring store if you want to buy yourself an OG Into the Necrosphere t-shirt. I said last week I'm going to be overhauling that Teespring store. So that's still the plan. I'm thinking of doing that around January time. So you have a limited window of opportunity to be able to pick up the original, the classic Into the Necrosphere designs. But thank you very much to all of those of you who have already done so. As I've said, I plow all of the money that I make on Teespring back into the podcast. And it has been an absolutely incredible year. Between the guests that I've had, between the way that the podcast has grown, equally I'm starting to see on social media a lot of you sharing your top podcasts of the year, and Into the Necrosphere has been featuring prominently on those lists. I am deeply grateful to all of you for that, and I am massively looking forward to what we are going to be able to build together in 2023. Folks, very importantly, if you don't already do so, make sure that you follow my inner circle, the horseman of the podcast apocalypse. On a Monday, Brandon Legion brings you interviews and conversations with horror movie directors, writers, actors, and producers on his podcast, Horrorwolf 666. On a Wednesday, Mike Hill brings you the original Extreme Metal podcast, Everything Went Black. I say Extreme Metal podcast, he tends to kind of cover anything and everything that he's interested in at the time. But he's a fascinating cat, somebody I consider to be a great friend. And he always seems to have somebody worth listening to on the show. So make sure that you check that out. And then on a Thursday, of course, he returns alongside the mighty Mike Scandato and Jeff Kashid to review horror movies, old and new, on my favorite podcast of the week, Necromaniacs. And then finally on a Sunday, my friend Carl Hykara, the Reverend Carl Hykara, delivers the Devil's Message on the Lord's Day with his esoteric and occult themed podcast, Soul Knocks. So make sure you're subscribed to all of those. Thank you very much for choosing to spend the next 2.5 hours with me as I welcome to the podcast Will Smith and Rick Habeeb of Reeking Aura. So welcome to the podcast, gentlemen. I said this to you off air, but massive fan of the record. It was one of these albums that kind of just really caught me by surprise, and it was partly I listened to it or it got on my radar because you guys are signed to Profound Law, and they seem to be on an absolute tear this year as far as just putting out one fantastic record after the next. So this album kind of hit me as I was taking a rare commute into London to go to the office. And it was like, I think by the time, partly because our public transport system is such a fucking shambles, by the time I got there, I'd listened to the record back to back about 3 times. So it was like every time I was listening to it, as I was getting progressively more annoyed with the state of public transport, I was like, the music was providing progressively more of an outlet for me.
Well, I can relate to that. Sorry about that, Will. I can relate to that. I used to live in New York City, and I still work there. So I frequent the subways once in a while. And these days, I'm not really rocking much music on headphones in the subways just because of those state of things down there. But
I was about to say, man, I heard you have to keep your head on a swivel on the New York subway now.
Yeah, so they say. I haven't really experienced anything like that. I've seen a couple skirmishes here and there, but no one's really fucked with me or anything. And it's fun times in New York. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Yeah, all I was going to say, Rick, was just to support what you just said was it sounded like he had a profoundly New York experience while listening to the album on the way to London. Yeah, fortunately, my job doesn't take me. I live in the suburbs out in Long Island, Suffolk County, New York, and I don't have to travel the public transportation in New York City as much as Rick. But I've heard things. Well,
I mean, it's getting pretty wild in London as well. The people are being, there's these fucking moped scooter gangs cruising around anybody who's driving anything remotely or looking like a luxury car, stabbing them for their watch, and they do smash and grabs where they'll break the window of a jewelry store and take stuff. As a matter of fact, Oxford Street, which is kind of one of in one of the main shopping and tourist hubs. I guess it's kind of like the modern day Times Square, because I know Times Square of old was pretty rough anyway, but it's kind of like the gentrified modern day Times Square. There was a stabbing there like quarter to 11, I think, in the morning, like in the middle of the week.
Jeez.
Yeah, so
it's becoming commonplace, it seems.
I do kind of feel like there was a bit of a short circuit post 2020, across the populace, and it just seems to have carried on in 2022. I mean, most shockingly, we now find out that the Liver King was on steroids.
I did see that. It's funny. Like, I don't even know who that is, except for the 1 or 2 times I've seen like quick headlines on him. Like, I haven't really pursued, reading about him or anything. But the one that I saw yesterday, he had this giant liver. It was like this big, and he was just eating it. And and he was jacked, and it said he's juiced up. I was like, oh, that's a shocker, man.
He's 45, and he has abs like a fucking He-Man, like those 80s He-Man action figures.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's exactly what he looks like, man.
Yeah.
I mean. Yeah, well, I think just getting the quick headlines, like you said, Rick, I think that's the whole point.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's like
that's how you digest things these days,
Yeah.
We're really we're beyond the 15 minutes of fame. We're at like 15 seconds of fame, literally nowadays with TikTok and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, man.
Crazy, man. It's weird. It's weird seeing metal and death metal and underground extreme metal kind of adapt to those mediums nowadays, because we can remember before, so not to go down that road, but we can remember before social media and the internet was part of underground metal, and seeing it adapt to Bandcamp and Spotify and YouTube and TikTok and all these things is interesting. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's all I'll say,
Yeah, Mike and I have spoken about social media on this podcast before, and as much as there is a part of me that wishes that social media could be removed from society and from our lives, I mean, the reality also is, for me at least, as a civilian starting a podcast, I certainly wouldn't have had a big enough network without social media to be able to do it the way I've done it. I mean, I met you guys through Instagram and through YouTube. And I was going to ask you, Will. So you run your own podcast as well. Um, Remind me, when did that podcast get started? And kind of how long have you been going for?
I can't believe I'm about to say it's been about going over 3 years now. The Heavy Hole podcast based out of Huntington, New York. We've expanded. Rick co-hosts with me at times, as do other bandmates of mine. And we have people that call in regularly for different kind of scene report type stuff. And of course, my longtime producers and behind the scenes guys, Justin and Tom, they still are. If people don't hear them on the podcast as much, they're always behind the scenes helping me out. I wouldn't be able to do it without that team. But we've been going strong, interviewing artists and doing our thing is research. We like to go in there and not record anything unless there's notes taken. We already looked on metal archives for you and all that sort of thing. And I really try to get to brass tacks with the artists who give us their time. And we interview. I try to cover everybody from all different backgrounds, different parts of the world, generationally, in terms of we've had like older artists who I look up to in terms of Mike Browning from Nocturnus and
Rest in peace, Steve Grimmett.
Rest in peace to Steve Grimmett of Grim Reaper, Trevor Perez of Obituary, and on and on. And I also try to cover a lot of young and upcoming artists. There's people on there that only have a demo out sometimes, and people out there that are on their first tour and their first album. I try to give a well-rounded view of the underground death metal scene from my perspective. Not to go on and on about it.
Well, you started around about the same time that I did, if it's about 3 years old now. But I noticed you got 220 episodes, so you're a bit more productive than I've been. Wow. And I considered myself reasonably productive, but you put me to shame.
Well, I don't know if I would go that far, man. Because I guess we started in 2019, early 2019. So we're almost at 4 years now, I should say. Yeah. And our thing has always been an episode every Friday. So, and every once in a while on Halloween or Christmas or New Year's, we'll throw out a few bonus episodes too. And we have a Patreon, things like that. But our thing has been an interview, or some sort of research episode every single Friday. And we've consistently done that, sometimes doubling up. Sometimes we'll record 7 or 8 interviews in a month because I'm going on tour the next month, or someone's getting married that weekend and can't edit it or something like that. So we just, like I said, it's not me alone. It's with Tom and Justin, and also Rick, who's here right now, Sam Sherrick, Terrell, and Dave Gladding, all members of Reeking Aura, things like that. We work behind the scenes as a team, man. So I really have to credit everybody who helps me out with it.
Yeah. Did you find that the lockdowns and things like that it gave your podcast a boost? Like, did you find? I mean, not necessarily even just listenership as such, but like just the number of guests that you were able to get on, because I experienced that because everyone was sat at home. So it was very easy to get people because you mostly had a captive audience.
I think that's 100% correct, man. And when that happened and concerts started being canceled and all that sort of thing, and I had shows and concerts booked and tours booked for my own bands that were canceled, we just said, well, we're going to double down on the pod, just like everybody else doubled down on podcasts and YouTube channels. The only thing was I had the advantage of having already been going for about a year, putting out regular episodes. So I kind of just, went right into it. I noticed there were a lot of new podcasts and new YouTube channels cropping up. So I think what you're talking about, all of a sudden, it was very easy, like I said, to get some bigger names in terms of death metal on the podcast, in terms of metal. Artists were sitting at home and they were looking for ways to promote their music. I think the thing that did happen, though, was it kind of crested at one point because you had so many podcasts and YouTube channels out there at one point during when everything was shut down and live music wasn't happening, 2020 and early 2021. I think artists started getting overwhelmed and overexposing themselves at some point. And I think there was almost a point where I noticed it was harder to book people. Especially once concerts and tours started getting booked again, because a lot of artists were podcasted out. You know what I mean? They were,
Yeah.
you know, they were everywhere for a while. So that's all I'll say about it. Which is it was interesting to watch, like, statistically, because we can watch our statistics, who downloads, who listens, on what platform, and all that sort of thing. That, like, yes, it did coincide with people being cooped up in the house and artists needing a different platform to promote their music.
Yeah. I do think you have a point. I was very mindful of that as well, because again, I take a slightly different approach to, or at least I hope I take a different approach to a lot of other podcasters. I'd also started before the pandemic, but you do get to a place. I mean, this is probably my departure point in any case for starting the show, but you certainly get to a place where you're very conscious of speaking to people and asking them stuff that they've been asked a million times over and over again. Because, I mean, firstly, no one wants to repeat themselves, but secondly, what are you offering people that's different or that's interesting that they can't just go and get somewhere else? What's the draw for them to check out your show versus, everything else? Agree with you as well. There were an awful lot of podcasts started. They seem to, many of them, be falling by the wayside again a little bit now. I'm also lucky. I think myself and Mike really hit it off, especially during the pandemic. We've got this horseman of the podcast apocalypse circle going, that's been pretty cool too, because it's just something that organically started. We've started promoting each other's shows, and we've kind of started our own, almost our own like mini scene. Which
like
is
web ring. Remember the web rings back in the day in the old internet?
Yeah.
And
it's something like that.
It sort of reminded me of right away is how old I am, man.
Yeah.
Shit.
Well, I was going to ask you guys this because I know, Will, you're in Afterbirth, and obviously Afterbirth assigned to Willowtip. But Rick, I know you're in a couple of bands as well, including Grey Skies Fallen, that is, as far as I know, is still independent. Wreaking Aura kind of seems to be the first band that you guys have been in that I wouldn't say have kind of broken big. It's not like Metallica big, but there's, in terms of profile, getting signed and being, I feel like a band definitely on the up. This seems to kind of be your moment. Is that the sense that you get as well?
Well, for me, as you mentioned, my other band, Grey Skies Fallen. Yeah, it's been an interesting ride there. Independent, yeah, we put out mostly all our albums by ourselves, and here and there we've had other labels come in and re-release them. Pretty much like right after we would put them out, somebody would put it out again. That's happened a few times, but we're recording a new record right now, and it's almost done. And we're talking to a couple of people, so hopefully it won't be independent too much longer, because there's pros and cons to that. I can speak to both sides. But as far as your question, for me personally, yes, because that band always does fly under some sort of radar, and doing things on our own is a lot more difficult than having a great label behind you. So this is really my first foray into the world of a label being behind me, and it's awesome because Chris and Profound Lore are great, and they've really been interested in what we've been doing even since before the album. I think there was interest from the demo that we put out, and we said we're going to put out a record, and I think they were interested in putting that out from the beginning. So it was very good. As far as Will's had experience beyond just this band. We were in another band together, which is partially taking a little rest right now. It's called Buckshot Facelift. That's Will's baby. And me, Will, and Tom Anderer, who's also in Reeking Aura, and Terrell, also in Reeking Aura. So 4 of us are in that band. So Will's also, go ahead, Will.
No, talking about Buckshot, I would say with Buckshot, I was going to say before, it's been 10 years now since Rick and Terrell joined Buckshot Facelift, which is a band I started in 2001 with Tom Anderer. And all 4 of us are now in Reeking Aura, along with our drummer Sam Sherrick and, of course, Ryan Lipinski, a part of the 3-guitar team, I should say. And Buckshot Facelift has enjoyed the support of some underground labels and promoters here and there, who we always will be grateful for. But really, we've slugged it out a long time. I was fortunate enough to be in a New York band that was signed to Profound Lore for 3 albums. before they kicked me out. And I enjoyed the support of Profound Lore all through that time. And I could see what Profound Lore did for a band in terms of distribution and financial support and support in other ways. And I really appreciate and respect Chris Bruni from Profound Lore Records for trusting in this project. And obviously it's more than just what I bring to the table. Rick, Gray Skies Fallen has been one of New York's premier underground doom death bands for decades now, with a long discography and career. I could say that as a fan because I've never been a member of Gray Skies Fallen. And Ryan Lipinski, people might know him better as the guitarist of Unearthly Trance from Long Island, New York, another really esteemed colleague of mine, to work with someone who brings that to the table. Also of Motive, a classic Long Island hardcore band. And I could go on to credit my other bandmates. Sam Sherrick, our drummer, is currently in Stabbed and Bowel Erosion, which are really hot bands with the younger generation. Not to sound like an old fogey saying that, but it's the truth. So I think every member of this band brings something to the table, and Chris Bruni obviously saw that he could work with that. And we're very grateful to him for seeing our vision.
How did it all come?
Yeah.
Sorry, you were going to say, Rick?
Just also Terrell Granum, our guitar player, who we shouted out once before. His band Thetis. I mean, we're all in different. We all have different bands, and we kind of like meet in the center for this band here. So that's kind of what the deal is. But I think as it goes on, this band, for me personally, becomes a little more important than maybe when we started out as like, hey, let's do some death metal. And now we see there's some seriousness behind this.
Yeah, I think that's what I was driving at. Listening to it, there is a real sense that something special is going on. I consciously compile my best of for the year. When the year is done, because like anyone who properly follows the scene, I think. We know that there's always a surprise towards the back end of the year. So I'll probably talk on my show about that next year. But I mean, Wreaking Aura is certainly strong contenders for that very hallowed list. But again,
Awesome.
listening to the record, there's two things that strike me. One, as I said, it genuinely feels like there's something, really exciting and something special going on. Yeah. Secondly, it sounds like men who have played together for a very long time. There's a real, there's a real feeling of chemistry on the record. And I know obviously you guys come from different bands. You're not new to the game, but how did this project get started? And I guess, how did you guys get when you're playing together as Wreaking Aura, when you started playing together as Wreaking Aura, did you get that same sense that there's just something right about the chemistry here?
Well, yeah. Initially, to make the long story short, it was myself and Ryan, going back about 7 years ago now. And I knew Ryan from a million years ago with our drummer from Gray Skies Fallen, Sal Gregory, right, introduced us to Ryan. And Ryan filled in on bass for Gray Skies Fallen in San Antonio one year in 1999 at the San Antonio November to Dismember Fest, which was a good festival. Ryan, not a bass player by trade, filled in for us, and that's how our relationship started. Fast forward 25 years, we said, let's start a death metal band, and let's, originally we were going to do some sweet death kind of worship stuff, but that didn't really, we didn't even do that. We didn't even start that. We were just like, let's see what we come up with. And Ryan cranked out a whole bunch of tunes. I contributed a little bit, and what we put together in a short amount of time, I think, was pretty impressive, considering the demo came out in March of 2020, and nothing was written for the new album after that. So it came together quick. But to answer your question, yeah, right away when we jammed in Tom's basement the first time with a drum machine, because we didn't have our drummer at the time. Our original drummer, Keith Harris, also in Afterbirth, an incredible drummer. And now we have Sam, two very amazing drummers we've been lucky to jam with and have in this band. But we started just jamming to songs in a basement on a click track. And even then we knew, okay, this sounds really good. We know how to jam together. We all, like you said, we played together for years. In Buckshot, and Tom is also in Gray Skies Fallen, and so all these things just came together to make it very simple, just to like hit the ground running.
I mean, Ryan Ryan Lipinski wrote the majority of the material on the album. Not to say these guys didn't contribute at all, but it made it very easy. Like he said, everyone's been in Buckshot Facelift for 10 years already. Me and Tom go back since we were in 8th grade together, grade school. Yeah. So it was very easy to just kind of bring Sam as the drummer or Keith as the drummer, whatever era you're talking about, into the fold. And Ryan Lipinski's he's an old hand. He's been in a bunch of bands. He's toured. He's been there and back with it. It was very easy for him to fall in with us. So like you said, we've all been around the block and back with this. And it's also a matter of everyone in this band has a bunch of projects. Sometimes whichever one is getting the label support, whichever one is getting the promoters asking you to play a show, that's the one that you're going to focus a little bit more on at the moment. You know what I mean? And there tends to be a natural, people say, how do you manage being in all these bands? There tends to be a natural cycle to it. So it is what it is, man. You have a calendar and a Sharpie and you keep it going,
Yeah. And there's 6 of us in this band. So that makes scheduling kind of difficult, especially running the gamut of ages that we have from like 46, which me to a young boy of Sam. I think he's like 27 or something like that. And some of that blows my mind, man.
There's some interesting conversations in the tour van because the rage of ages. A lot of pro wrestling talk between him and our drummer, the oldest and the youngest guy in the van. That was interesting.
Yeah, I'm the one that used to watch pro wrestling when I was younger, and he's the one that wrestles. So I mean, we talk about that all the time.
Well, as soon as you said November to Dismember, I was thinking ECW.
ECW, yeah.
And it's. I mean, I was obsessed with pro wrestling. I mean, to a point where when I went to university, my dissertation in university was about the WWF. And then sadly, the things went pretty rapidly downhill from about. I mean, I'd say from 2003. There were some peaks in the WWE after that, but you kind of got to 2010, 2011, and it just didn't. It just didn't appeal to me anymore. I think
I checked out around 2000. That's when I had stopped watching.
Yeah, I think that's actually kind of why I love AEW so much. They sort of reignited a love of pro wrestling in me because I think I saw their first pay-per-view and I was like, fuck, this takes me back to like ECW. It's not quite as chaotic and quite as insane because nothing could legally be that way in our day and age, but it definitely had it at least had a little bit of that magic was there. Yeah.
That's
like some
great.
of that craziness.
I've heard a lot about that. Heard that a lot.
But so you checked out Will. Were you ever a fan of the pro wrestling?
Absolutely, but not to the extent I think of you or Rick or other friends of mine. And this has come up on my podcast a lot because Justin, who nowadays mainly does the graphic design for us, but also used to participate a lot more in the pod. He's a big pro wrestling guy, so we would have conversations because I'm more of a nostalgic WWF and WCW from the late 80s to early 90s guy. And I'll just leave it at that. That metal overtook that part of my imagination and life and wallet for my life. I do on Long Island here. We do have, I guess you'd call like underground or not underground, but independent cards at different places. And I was frequenting those here and there when I could, go into warehouses and seeing like who was it? It wasn't Ken who there was the Sandman. It was a lot of the old ECW guys had their own thing going for a while there. Who's the guy? The guy from New York, Rick. Who's the? I can't think of his name. For the clean cut Italian guy that used to wrestle ECW all the time. What
ECW Italian clean?
The big guy with the black slick back hair, man.
Tommy Dreamer.
Yeah, Tommy Dreamer.
Tommy,
yeah. I couldn't think of it. And
I don't picture him as Italian, but yeah, he's Italian. He's definitely Italian. That guy.
I was just getting at the look. He looks like the guy from Trailer Park Boys.
Yeah, he does actually.
Yeah, he does. See him come out of a upside down car holding his glass perfectly filled.
Yeah.
But he had his own little independent touring federation that came to Long Island a few years ago. So long story short, I'm like a nostalgic wrestling fan, but I will go out and check out the independents when they come to my neighborhood. I support the dream. Our drummer Sam Sherrick is out there doing work. It's all good.
Yeah.
I just double checked now. Tommy Dreamer is originally from Yonkers.
Okay.
Yeah. And I remember that show that he used to do as well. It was called, I can't remember whether it was called Hardcore Heaven There's something like that, and he would have a lot of the old ECW guys come on and you know, perform there. And it was, I mean, it wasn't any great shakes, but it was if you were into that era of wrestling, it was always kind of fun to catch it.
These they used to run a lot in New York, you know, Philly and New York. So I luckily got to catch about 4 or 5 live shows, ECW shows. I got almost blasted with a chair at one of them by Brian Lee. That was awesome. So
dude, were you actually at the bingo hall in
No,
Philadelphia?
I never went to the Philadelphia. They ran some shows at Elks Lodge in Queens, New York. They did a show in Staten Island, where I'm from. There used to be like a sports, a big bubble, like a big dome, like an inflatable dome, and they had like a rock climbing and stuff, and they had an ECW there a few times, and that was so crazy, man.
Yeah,
it was fucking awesome. It was like you're at a mosh pit, you know, like in the middle of a fight. You know, it was great. I was 20 years old. Can't beat it.
Didn't they used to have events on Long Island, Rick? Because
yeah. I also went to Roosevelt. I saw ECW in Roosevelt.
Like ECW in the 90s kind of ran concurrent with the Long Island underground hardcore and metal scene, because if you went to like None of the Above Records in Center Reach or Slip Disc Records in Valley Stream, those were like the 200, or Looney Tunes in Babylon. If you went to the record stores that sold metal and hardcore, they would also have ECW flyers up and things like that. And two guys that were in punk bands in my high school, I remember they were like saving up money and like trying to make money with their bands so that they could go to ECW school, which was like out East Long Island somewhere at the time. I'm talking like late 90s.
Awesome. So
I think that was the school that Taz did, was it not?
It could very well be.
Yeah.
You probably know better than I'm. Just like I remember these guys in high school that instead of going to college, like that was their plan, and they never made, they never became pro wrestlers. But like God bless them, whatever. So I'm just making the point that even if you didn't follow it, like if you were into metal or hardcore or punk or whatever, it was just kind of there in the 90s too. Like it was part of the underground scene in a way.
Yeah. Well, I think actually, I mean, a lot of people potentially overlook how many people were turned on to metal by watching wrestling in the especially in the mid to late 90s, because as you say, there was such a kind of close connection between the two, and ECW especially. But I don't know whether you watched that Dark Side of the Ring series that they have on Vice. Did you see the one on, just talking about like ECW legends, did you see the one on New Jack?
Yeah. He was
dude,
a pretty hardcore guy, man. That guy lived a life,
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, I mean, the thing that blew
stuff.
my mind the most was the guy that he threw off the scaffolding and literally told him, "I hope you die," as he throws him off.
Yeah. Or the what was the large man that he beat up, that if legitimately the cop,
was it like the 17-year-old?
Yeah. That oofa. Yeah, that was brutality, man. At its highest level.
But wasn't that was the guy that he lied? It's Matt Stronset is his name.
Yeah,
I was like, it was like
That's
on the tip of my tongue.
Yes. He lied about his age, and they don't, that in the history of wrestling, that's happened a bunch of times where like a guy's lied about his training or he's lied about his age, and then that shit comes back to bite whoever in the ass because they get hurt, Like it happened in WWF at one point. Some guy said he was trained and he broke his neck, and that was the end of that dude. Yeah.
No, absolutely nuts. But yeah, so New Jack's promo after the fucking after he's destroyed him, I don't care if the motherfucker dies.
Yeah,
Jesus Christ,
that's the heel right there. That's the ultimate heel.
No, he was a great heel as well, actually. When he was doing like, was it Rocky Mountain Wrestling, when he was wrestling for Jim Cornette? He was calling people honkies and stuff like that. It was so fucking funny, but like the heat that guy got was just insane.
Yeah. What were you gonna say?
No, I was just gonna say you can watch. There's a full-length interview with New Jack on Vlad TV on YouTube that I watched when it came out. Not too, maybe within the last year or two, and he just tells the whole story, his whole life story, from the horse's mouth, and no filter. I mean, what a guy, man. He's lived some fucking life. You know what I mean? He goes into his childhood. He talks about all the controversies with wrestling and everything, and it's pretty amazing, man.
I'll check that
The
out.
justifiable homicides that he got away with. I think that's how he introduced himself. One was Beyond the Mat. He's like, I got 4 justifiable homicides.
Well, he passed away a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, it's about 2-3 years ago he passed away. But I mean, from all that cocaine, it's that's going to take its toll on you eventually.
Toll, right?
That November to Dismember Fest that you were referring to, though, there were some pretty badass bands on that bill as well.
That was amazing. That was the highlight of my musical life. I mean, that those times we were playing these great fests thanks to Don Decker, also rest in peace, from the mighty Anal Blast, who was booking these shows for Jack Koshik. Jack Koshik catches a lot of shit these days for those fests. I guess, how things were run or whatever. And some bands got dicked over and whatnot, but we didn't. And, bands our level were paying thousands of dollars to play those shows, and we were playing them for free. And because we were on Nightfall Records, that was Don Decker's record label, and he put out our first album, The Fate of Angels. He put that out for us, and we got to play with Opeth. Actually, he said, who do you want to see play the fest? And I said Opeth and Catatonia. And then there they were in March of the March Metal Meltdown. When was their first? No, I'm sorry. Milwaukee 2000. So right before that, November to Dismember Fest, we played with Opeth and Catatonia and all that. And the November show was with In Flames. We were playing with In Flames and Moonspell, and then us, and then Moonspell. It was crazy. And then, so I peaked at 24, man. So that's something that's hard to swallow sometimes, but now I'm 46 and we're trying again.
You're going to re-peak at 47. All right. Next year's our year. Reeking Aura.
I will concur with Will. I really do think, as I said, I've been a fan of the scene for long enough, and I've observed the industry for long enough to know there is something special to Reeking Aura. But
we appreciate that, man.
One band that you had playing on that November to Dismember Fest, I've spoken about them before, but it's the one band I fucking desperately wish I could have seen live, and I don't think I'll have the opportunity because I'm not sure that they'll ever kind of get together and play live again. But SOD. My God,
that was during the reunion phase.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't care when I would have loved to catch them at any point. I mean, ideally, if I could have been at the CBGB show that they recorded when they did live at Budokan, I mean, that to me is like the greatest live spectacle I've ever seen in my life. Was that at the Ritz?
Yeah, and I remember that show because I remember not all my friends going, but I remember a couple. I was only 15 or 16. I was 92, I think, early 92, I believe. And I remember the show happening, and it pissed me off because, Speak English or Die, they were finished after that. And then they popped up to play that show, and it was like a big deal. So
yeah.
That's a regret not being able to go. That was the one I think Billy Milano jumped off the speakers off the monitors from like 30 feet up.
And also beat up a couple of people in the front row with the microphone.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I'm fascinated though by both of your stories in terms of kind of how you got into metal, because it sounds like some of you have known each other since school days. So how did the journey happen for you? And what was the scene in New York like? Because obviously it's very different from, I recently had a guy on talking about the Norwegian black metal scene, and we've kind of, I've spoken to various folks about what growing up is like in where they were at, people of our age, and what it was like discovering metal, what you needed to do to kind of discover the bands that you ended up loving. But what's kind of the story? What's the background with the two of you? Maybe Will, starting with you.
Well, what's interesting is Rick and I come from completely different places geographically, even though it's still within like the greater New York area, and different generations a little bit, I would say, in terms of getting into underground metal, because Rick was around for way cooler shit than me. But long story short, I'm from Suffolk County, New York, which is kind of the suburbs east, about an hour or so east of New York City on Long Island. Biggest thing in the 90s around my area for teenagers that were into that type of thing was hardcore, Vision of Disorder, Indecision, E-Town Concrete, Victory Records putting out the first Hatebreed album, Buried Alive, Snapcase, all that sort of thing. That was the real big deal for most kids in my high school that were part of the small minority of kids that were listening to extreme music. Everyone else was into hip hop and pop music and stuff, but hip hop is like kind of mandatory too for everybody. for the most part. And then my buddy Adam Rotella, who's like the underground noisecore legend who people might know from Anal Birth. He's a few years older than me and has a couple of cousins and younger brothers that were more my age in the neighborhood. I start hanging around him when I'm 14, 15, and he gets me into underground death metal because he's already straight pipelined into tape trading, writing letters back and forth to bands, photocopied zines, the whole nine. So when I'm 14, I kind of get like a warp zone straight into underground death metal through Adam. We start Liquefied Maggots, which is our noisecore project, when I'm like 15. I joined a band called Cursed Earth that's mainly based out of Queens. I used to have to take the train when I was 15, 16 years old to New Hyde Park, which is practically Queens. It's still Long Island, but it's almost in Queens. And I was in a band called Cursed Earth. We opened up for Dehumanized and, a few other little Mortal Decay. We opened up for some bands in the late 90s at Castle Heights in Queens. And then I was in Biolich for a few years. Long story short, I was in another band for a decade, and I put in a lot of work and 3 albums with another band that was supported by Profound Lore. And other plans were made besides me being in the band. So now I'm doing this with my friends. And the whole time I've been doing Buckshot Facelift for over 20 years. Really, I've been running with the name Buckshot Facelift, probably about 16, 17 years with Tom Anderer, and about 10 years with Terrell and Rick, and practically the whole 20 years with our drummer Sal, who's also in Gray Skies Fallen. So that's where you kind of get into this everything interweaving is kind of through Buckshot Facelift, because we shared a drummer with Gray Skies Fallen for several years. Then we shared a guitarist with Gray Skies Fallen, and our bass player joined Gray Skies Fallen. And nowadays you got Wreaking Aura. And I'll kind of stop there because I could elaborate. The lore goes on. You know what I mean, man? I'll kind of let Rick take over from here.
I will just say one thing, and that is that Vision of Disorder is a fucking badass band. Absolutely. I've loved them since way, way, way back. It's a shame that, it doesn't seem like they're ever going to do anything ever again. Last record they did was Raised to the Ground, and I don't think they're going to do another record. It certainly doesn't seem like that's the plan.
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, it's not a band I've always followed. It's obviously I respect them and their legacy, and I have a lot of friends who that band means a lot to. But like I've said, in the 90s, when all that stuff was going on, I was looking for Dying Fetus and Cryptopsy and Fermento from Spain and Gore Grind and Dead Infection. And I kind of was, I guess as a teenager, I was kind of rejecting a lot of the local stuff and stuff that was popular in high school with some of my friends, and looking for my own little underground stuff. And in hindsight, obviously I have to respect VOD and that legacy and everything. I don't know that they're going to, come back with another recording or something like that.
No, it certainly doesn't seem that way. Although on the flip side, Dying Fetus put out that new single, which is fucking killer.
That band is probably going to outlive Cockroaches after nuclear war, and all the best to them. I hope they do, man. Dying Fetus is like unstoppable. Cheers, John Gallagher. Cheers.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. So, Rick, what's kind of your journey into the darkness?
Well, without getting too crazy here and too long and drawn out, where I'm from in Staten Island, New York, that's kind of infamous place in New York City annals. So it's like, what is that place? People, they don't even want to they don't even want to take credit for that as being part of New York City, but it is somehow. And there I was. And right near Staten Island is Brooklyn. And in Brooklyn, there was L'Amour. That's the greatest club that ever, for metal that ever lived, that ever existed. So I knew the kid whose dad owned L'Amour when I was like 8 years old, 7 years old. He got me into metal. I remember being in his basement for his birthday. I must have been 7 or 6 or something. And they had Sabbath on, and I was like, holy fuck. I was like, what is this shit, man? So, and then he's like, my dad owns L'Amour's. And I was like, what the fuck is L'Amour's? And this was 82, 83. So yeah, 6, 7 years old. And this is when the club is first taking off. Like Metallica's playing there with Raven, and this is Mustaine's last show, so it's all this stuff around that time. But I was 7 years old. So what do? I don't know anything about this. Fast for White Lion, that's another band that he managed, the kid's father managed. So they were always around, and it was crazy. So I'm a little kid. So of course I pick up on it. So fast forward. about 1992. I'm about 16. I start being able to go to shows at this place. And that's when I'm seeing all these, amazing shows, being introduced to bands on the way up and also at the height. So that club had everything, right? So it was really incredible. And I started playing around that time. Around the time I was around 13, started being in bands around 16 with Joe D'Angelo, who's in Gray Skies Fallen to this day. He's been in and out of that band over the years, but he's in now. And me and him, we started writing music together, and we've been doing that almost 30 years now, which is unbelievable to say that. And Gray Skies started in 97. And that's also crazy. Actually, it was before that, but we took that name in 97 and met these dudes here, Will and Tom and Terrell. I met those guys in 2012, thanks to Sal, our drummer. But Sal, he kept things secret. He liked to, I'm not, I don't want to introduce these two sides of my music life. And he deprived us of many years of being able to jam with each other before that. So for that, I always hold over his head. But it's good that we came together eventually, despite Sal, because
and now we're in the band together without him. And now we're in the band without him.
It's funny how that works.
Respectfully, part of the genesis of Reeking Aura, besides Ryan and Rick writing together, is our drummer and Buckshot Facelift, Sal. Respect to him. He's a very hardworking, career-minded man with a young family. So he can't commit to underground metal the same way that we might want to, which happens a lot in music. We're all still good friends. We just saw him the other day at a show. He came out to support me performing with Afterbirth at a local show the other day, man. So all due respect to him. But Reeking Aura, the idea is we want to be able to get out on the road, maybe tour a little, do this and do that, and work at a faster rate than Buckshot Facelift. So Buckshot Facelift is still a band. It's just more at Sal's discretion, and when he has the time in his life, besides obviously career and family have to come first. So that's all I'm getting at.
I would just real quickly closing up in Buckshot Facelift, I would recommend the last two recordings that we did: Ulcer Island, the full length in 2017, and Living Ghosts of the North Shore in 2015 or 2014, and those I think those might get a little attention now, from a little residual attention from this stuff. So I'm hoping that's the case, because that's some good shit on there.
Yeah.
And there's some Jim Cornette. There's Jim Cornette on there. There's Leap and Lenny Poffo on there. So don't you worry. Yeah.
I don't know if we're getting enough attention to get residual attention, but hopefully.
That's true, man. The drippings.
Those early days at Namura, tell me about some of the bands that you saw there, and like some of the. I mean, you must have witnessed some serious spectacle in your day. Well,
in '94, I mean, I started going late '92, so I'm 16. It was pretty much 16 up. You can get in there, and I think some shows are even all ages. It was hit or miss, but I really wasn't able to go until I was like 16 or so. And during those times, it was a lot of Life of Agony. It was a lot of Typo Negative, which I mean, those are, the first album, before the first album, for both bands, it was amazing. The Biohazard, who also we got a lot of talk about in our van. They were no joke in 1992 in Lemoore, man.
Dude, my friend Leorcifer, the tattoo artist, he actually did a tattoo for me as well. We were talking about music and stuff, and he went to New York when he was 17, which I think was around about the same time. Okay. And he's similar to me, listens to a lot of different kinds of music, but he leans towards black metal, kind of same as I do. But I think likewise we have certain preserves that we will just always love. Biohazard being one of them. And he told me when you saw a Biohazard show in those early days, he said it was the fucking scariest thing he has ever been to. And he's a big dude. He's probably like 6'4", 6'5". Yeah. And he says you literally fear for your life when you're in that venue.
I saw them twice. I saw them in Lemoore, and I saw them at this place called the Academy, which I don't even know where the hell that was. I remember it being an old theater. I got to research it, but that was the show that they filmed the Onyx video, Slam. And I'm in the pit in that video. You could see me for like a split second, and that's unbelievable. But yeah, that's true. My friend lost his front teeth at that show. And we're 16-year-old kids, and I'm a big boy at the time too, and I still am. But like boom, that was intimidating, man. That was like NFL, guys running. It was just insanity. The beating you would take in that pit, but you're 16 years old, you bounce right back up.
Yeah. Like guys have to go. Well, Biohazard obviously they're doing the reunion next year.
That's what we
heard. And I have said, well, I'll be turning 43 next year. I said I'm gonna treat it like training for fight camp, like 8-week training camp before I go to play, so that I can hang in the pit.
Yes.
But
I saw Carcass there, and Carcass I saw there on the Heartwork tour, which was unbelievable. There was 5. It was. Lemoore, sometimes they had weird, openers. Like it was just Carcass and 5 New York hardcore bands, and it did not jive too well. But I got to see Carcass there. Sabotage, right? Sabotage play there all the time, but I got to see them there with Alex Skolnick on guitar. Sorry about my animals here. No, Alex Skolnick was on guitar, which was also a very brief period in that band's history. I saw tons of shows there, and you could always see me in the YouTube videos. I'm always right up front, my stupid head. You could always see my head. You
would have seen, or both of you probably would have seen some of the, surely some of the old New York legends, in their early days, like Suffocation, Immolation, bands like that, right?
That's more Long Island, and that's Will's ball game right there. Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's not. It's geographically
time-wise, but
yeah. See, I mentioned my friend Adam Rotella. He got to see all that. My big story that I've told many times is there was a club called the Roxy here in Huntington, New York, where back in the day, Long Island, particularly Huntington, was its own territory for touring, meaning that bands would tour New York City and hit Huntington, Long Island as part of a regular tour routine. Death, Napalm Death, Obituary, Testament, Cannibal Corpse, Cynic, everybody came through there. Suffocation and Internal Bleeding and Pyrexia was the backyard. Life of Agony and Typo Negative, I'm sure they were there. It was the spot of Long Island.
They were there. I remember them playing there.
And I grew up in Huntington, New York. I still live in Huntington, New York. And I remember, like, as a kid being driven around by my parents or friends' parents. And I actually vividly remember Testament, I think it was Testament and Slayer, but definitely Testament on the billboard out in front of the place. Sadly, that club closed down the year I got into extreme metal as like a 14-year-old. And the general climate of the scene shifted from the early 90s, where metal and death metal was huge, to the mid to late 90s, where it was more about hardcore and metal was very passé when I was getting into metal. So Suffocation, Pyrexia, Internal Bleeding, these are all bands that were legendary and probably still are, like, of legend in my imagination, because I didn't get to see them during those classic eras. I was fortunate enough, and I'll always be grateful to Chris Basile of Pyrexia to tour and play a one-off show filling in on vocals for Pyrexia a few years ago. And I'll only know them as legends from the Sermon of Mockery era, playing those shows. And I've interviewed him about that, and I've heard all these stories, but I sadly was not around for that because of my generation. I was born about 5 years too late to do that. My generation, I did get to catch Internal Bleeding, Repudiation, Disfigured, the first show I ever went to, Immortal Suffering, Mortal Decay, Dehumanized. So a lot of those bands that are associated with the late 90s, like the start of the so-called brutal death metal movement and the slam death metal movement, that was my bread and butter back in the day, and I am fortunate to have caught them. Like, I've seen Dehumanized when Prophecies Foretold first came out, a billion times, as far as I'm concerned. I couldn't even count how many times as a teenager I was out there and I got to open up for them and things like that. I'll always be grateful to that. Shout out to Rich and George and anyone who's ever been in Dehumanized. The guitarist in my first band, Cursed Earth, in high school, went on to play in Dehumanized. He's on Controlled Elite. Paul Tavora, so that was my experience growing up, but I was not around for the classic era. I've also, you mentioned before, I am now the current vocalist of Afterbirth, who put out the Psychopathic Embryotomy demo in 94. Rest in peace to Matt Duncan, the original singer. When I was a kid in like 98, 97, 98, 99, I was a teenager listening to that demo. That was a blueprint along with Demolich, Anti-Bowman, for my vocal style, my burping guttural vocal style that I do in a lot of my bands. It's kind of a weird, bittersweet thing that I sing for Afterbirth now because I'm only in the band. Matt Duncan, unfortunately, is no longer with us and was no longer in the band and so on and so forth. So it's a weird kind of roundabout way thing. You asked before how we came up in metal. Afterbirth has always been heroes of mine in death metal, and now they're colleagues of mine in a crazy twist of fate, So just getting back to that whole New York thing, for me, I missed a lot of that early classic stuff. But it's funny that nowadays I see Repudiation getting a lot of hype, which they should, in the slam guttural brutal scene online, and Internal Bleeding and Pyrexia are still going full force as they should be. Suffocation obviously too, man. So that's about it, man. I'll cut it there.
Well, the recent Pyrexia and the recent Eternal Bleeding records, I both thought were fucking outstanding. And I had Chris Pervelis on the podcast about 6-7 months ago. What a great guy. And I will definitely have him back on again because, again, as a dude with loads of stories to tell, I mean, you could tell he was itching to get more out. What is the scene like nowadays? Like I think about London when I first arrived here, which was 2002, and there was a real excitement about going to shows. We had the London Astoria, we had the Mean Fiddler. There have been many shows recorded there. Deicide recorded, for example, when London Burns at the Mean Fiddler. There was a real vibe about those places. And both of them are now shut. They've been turned into a train station. Wow. With the exception of, the kind of iconic underworld spot in Camden in London, most of the other places are closed. And you Very have sad. these shitty venues cropping up here and there where, people are converting a pub into a concert area or a venue to play live shows. But I mean, I saw Broken Hope do one of the best death metal shows I've ever seen in my entire life. But I mean, the floor was littered with picnic tables. I mean, it was just embarrassing. Like I actually told Jeremy afterwards, like this, I genuinely feel embarrassed that you've had to play in this fucking shit all over the place. So yeah, there's definitely been I wouldn't. It's not gentrification isn't the right word, but it's like let's call it what it is, a fucking pussification of London. The scene has been scaled back, defanged. The excitement is, in my opinion, largely been taken away. And I feel sometimes that's reflected in the crowds as well. Like, all of the shows I've been to in the last 2-3 years, you never see the same level of excitement and intensity from the crowd that you saw from when you're talking about shows like that. I mean, I remember when I saw Biohazard the first time, the way I've described it to people is like the floor literally became a tumble dryer, and if you were not part of it, you were made to become a part of it. So. But I loved that. I mean, it was I loved it for the same reason I loved wrestling. It was just that feeling of excitement, like something can happen at any moment. There's something shady in the air. I love that, and I even though I'm an old man now, I still crave that.
I can agree. I can definitely relate to that. Also, I'm going to be in London next year. I'm hoping to. I'm going there for a show, and I'm hoping to catch some good metal shows. I don't know. We'll see. And I'll see how that scene is there. But I don't know how long I'm going to be there, though. I'm going to see a show at the event of the Hammersmith Apollo.
Who are you seeing?
Hamel.
Okay.
70s prog band. So I'm going out there just for that by myself. And that's going to be a blast.
Well, we'll need to hook up when you're here then.
Hell yeah, dude!
I'll make sure you're taken care of.
That'll be fucking killer, man.
Stuff. The thing is, I mean, the music scene here in the UK is great. I mean, I was going to ask you guys on your take on the 2022 crop of releases. From my perspective, I think globally, as far as like creativity is concerned and the steady stream of quality releases coming out, it's fucking insane. I mean, like I've kind of theorized before that I think it might be just a symptom of the crazy times that we live in. It's a little bit again like the early 90s was this uncertain time, the Gulf War and all this shit. And that sort of, I remember David Vincent once saying, these are very violent times, and violent times give birth to violent art. I kind of feel we're in the same boat. It's just amplified exponentially, and there's like an added level of crazy on top of it. Just I probably got us off track now, but just like the scene in New York now, the club scene and stuff like that. What is it like over there right now?
Well, we have Brooklyn, so we have St. Vitus Bar, and that's the big spot to play. And it's a smaller size-wise, with 300 or so, but I mean, that's the spot to play. And also in Brooklyn, there are all other great venues, that play our style of music. So metal is pretty covered as far as New York. What do you think, Will?
We're spoiled in terms of New York City, but New York City is also about 45 minutes to an hour one way for people from my area. Long Island is coming back in its own right. That's the thing, is that there's never been a shortage of younger people in their 20s and 30s that are excited about extreme music. But for a long time, it had to do with hardcore from the late 90s on, then metalcore and deathcore and whatever core type stuff going on for a long time. But the last several years, I think probably in many other places, maybe where you're from too, but death metal and black metal and grindcore have seemed to gained a lot more foothold with the younger generation. And that's reflected in Long Island, but it's also good for the old school bands. I think that Internal Bleeding and Suffocation and Pyrexia and many other, I'm talking about the regional bands where I'm from, but many other old school bands all over the place are enjoying younger fans and younger support and venues that will accommodate them now that there are younger people in addition to the OG fans who stuck with them. We have a place called Amityville. Everyone in the, world famous Amityville Horror. Right, that there's in the town of Amityville on Long Island, also allegedly Jaws based on Amityville, Long Island. We also have the Amityville Music Hall, which is kind of the premier venue for underground death metal and hardcore in that area. There's also Shaker's Pub, and we're playing Rams American Pub, quick plug, December 17th with Pyrexia, Malignancy, and Human Devourment and Bowel Erosion. So there's venues on Long Island that are hosting underground death metal, hosting gore grind and grindcore, and that's something that for a long time people had to drive out to New York City and drive out to Brooklyn for, which, all due respect to St. Vitus Club and other venues out in the city, but it's nice to see Long Island becoming its own venue, because like I said before, with like that old club, the Roxy from back in the day, Long Island used to be its own territory, as they say, in terms of touring, where it would be worthwhile financially for bands to play somewhere in Brooklyn or Queens or Manhattan, and then also make an additional stop out here on Long Island and then go about their way on the tour, and hopefully that'll happen again. We also just saw the Cavalera brothers right in my hometown of Huntington here at the Paramount, and Hatebreed and Gatecreeper stopped right here in Huntington. So it is coming back. Metal worldwide is experiencing a renaissance, like you said. There's no shortage of great bands and great albums. It's a little saturated even, but we're enjoying that, and I'm sure people in places like Long Island, all across the United States and other parts of the world, where you're not necessarily in a big urban market for touring bands, are enjoying that too.
Yeah.
I think, to touch on your point real quick, the pandemic and all you were saying about our times here, and I think that can in addition to the pandemic, teaching bands how to write in a different manner. All right, so you're forced to write in over email and seclusion like that, and sharing tracks and such, and that becomes kind of a way of doing things and streamlines things. And I think a lot of bands probably it opened their eyes. Oh shit, let's, we could be more productive, or we could crank stuff out. And it offers itself to a different way of writing. And I think maybe that also has something to do with all the output you're seeing now.
I would say not just that, but like some of the tools that bands talk to me about, that they're able to use when they're collaborating and when they're writing is fucking insane as well. And the quality that they get out of it. just in terms of like sheer sound quality, the production that you're able to give a record, but that you're basically recording out of your bedroom,
Absolutely.
is fucking mind blowing.
Yeah, if you know what you're doing and you put in the time to learn, the software is cheap these days, and as long as you have a decent computer, I guess, and even you could do stuff on tablets. I know a dude that records on an iPad, and it sounds crazy.
I mean, you also have people that like say I write my, if I've got a riff idea, I just go onto GarageBand on my iPad and I just record it on there, so I remember.
That's the limits of my abilities at this point right now with the DAWs and such.
So how are people responding to Wreaking Aura? Like I said, I mean, from where I'm sitting, it feels like you guys are definitely on the ascent. As far as like, you guys playing shows and stuff like that, when you're out playing, how are the crowds receiving you? Because you're definitely, so, we've spoken about, a lot of death metal bands and gore grind bands and stuff like that, but there's kind of an intelligence to Wreaking Aura. And I think, again, that's kind of part of what I like. There's Profound Lore seems to do this quite a lot. They had Haunter, they had Cosmic Putrefaction. They'll release these bands that on the face of it are like, super brutal, but there's so much more going on beneath the skin. And for me, that's definitely true of Wreaking Aura as well.
Layers,
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, I could definitely see that. And I definitely see that standing out more on the new stuff that's going to come out. Hopefully in 2023 at some point. I'm not going to make any promises, but that's what I would love for it to occur, and we shall try to make that happen. So we're definitely going straight forward with that too. New material. So
I think in terms of how crowds receive us live, that can always be a mixed bag. We're still a new band in the long term of things. We're guys who've been in bands for decades, so Reeking Aura is still a young pup. You know what I mean? We put out the 3-song EP. We put out the album. Now we're very excited about writing the second album. We just did our first real tour with shout to Hath from New Jersey and Carrion Vale from Indiana. Great guys who really helped us out in terms of gear, and just, we really cut our teeth on that first tour, man. And I was very proud of my colleagues in Wreaking Aura and proud of the band that we got through that. And that was our first time playing for crowds outside of New York. It was funny because we played Philadelphia. Shout out to everyone in Philadelphia. What a beautiful experience playing the Kung Fu Necktie Club down there in Philadelphia. Great crowd, a lot of people, because Philadelphia, there's still enough people. It's still close enough to New York where we had people coming out that knew Buckshot Facelift, that knew Gray Skies Fallen, that knew Unearthly Trance, that knew other bands we'd been in and things like that. Once we get away from that, though, and we get to like Tennessee, we played a show in Knoxville, played a show in Nashville, played a show in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We're away from home. I got to say, the crowds were great. I can't attribute that to us being so awesome and us being so sick or anything like that. But one thing I can promise people is we're always going to bring it live. We're guys who've been playing shows for a long time. This is what we love to do. And whether it's 2 people or 200 people, the cliche saying goes, but it's true. We're going to bring it to you 100%, man. So and one thing I will say, though, too, you ask about the crowds and what a crowd, I really feel like for me personally, and I think for my bandmates, maybe, I know this is something that happens in a lot of bands. Maybe Rick, you could speak to it. Playing live more, going on tour and bringing your product and your songs, around the country outside of your home territory. I think that plays a factor in inspiring the writing later on, because you start maybe the way you write, you write for the live experience more, or those experiences are now part of the tapestry that goes into your writing. I don't know, Rick, I'll let you take it.
It could, I could see that as well. I mean, you could be sick of a certain thing. With Gray Skies, there was a period about 20 years ago now. That's every time I say that shit, it's like unbelievable, but like, where it was like, okay, I don't know what happened at the time, but we were kind of like a little, all right, I'm not saying sick of what we were doing, but our second album had come out, and it didn't really do anything, to be honest with you, because it was on some label it just failed immediately, the label. So it was just there. And this is 2002. So it wasn't really the internet like we have it today. But after that, we were like, let's do something different. And, we totally kind of changed our sound a little bit there, and I already lost my I already lost my train of thought because I enjoyed a little bit before we started this interview, and I can't remember allegedly, and I don't remember the question at hand right here.
Well, I think actually Will made something that got or said something that got my gears turning. I think writing in service of the live experience.
Yeah, so you could see what maybe works at a time, or and things were working. The sound was good and stuff like that with our band at the time, but we wanted something different, and we did something a lot more mellow, and we only played a few shows in that style back at the time. I think, Will, you actually caught one of those gigs, which was the weird time for the band. And it was a different style, a different sound. We were playing older stuff here and there too, but it was this new kind of sound that you do right based on maybe not the reaction that you get, but it's a combination of everything. Live, how things feel, writing, how you feel. It's all about how you feel. So, in that given period of the band, especially if your band is 25 years old, at certain parts, you're going to have certain feelings and you want to do certain kinds of music. That's me anyway. So this next Wreaking Aura album isn't going to sound like the first one, which didn't sound like the EP, in my opinion. Even though Ryan wrote the bulk of the stuff, you could definitely hear an evolution between the two recordings. And you're definitely going to hear a bigger evolution from album 1 and album 2. And like Will said, we are a new band. So being very lucky to be on Profound Lore Records for our first album was an unbelievable stroke of luck. Not many bands get that opportunity, if we're being honest. So we're very grateful for that, and we're going to definitely step it up on the next one.
Yeah. I think just kind of getting back to the idea of writing in service of the live experience. So that is one thing that I think where bands that are as layered musically as what a band like Reeking Aura is, you always run that risk of being too much or overwhelming the audience if all they know is seeing you live. I remember when Opeth. So when I saw Opeth the first time, it was like 2002, I think. And I remember the vast majority of the audience literally just stood there with their arms folded. Now they're like, a massive band, but it was they played at the Mean Fiddler. It was probably 70% full. There were, Opeth diehards there that knew, Orchid, and they knew Morning Rise. But, did they know any other albums? Did they, was there a lot of people there that were like, this is incredible, but not really. And then equally, I've also seen like super fast and super aggressive bands like Hate Eternal play. And I'm a huge fan of Hate Eternal. I remember, being at Hate Eternal shows twice, and both times leaving after like the third or fourth song. I was like, I don't even know what song they're playing right now. It just sounds like a fucking blasting mess.
I hear what you're saying about. I could totally hear that about certain bands that. None jump to my head like that, jump to my mind like that right off the top. But yeah, so you walk in a room and it just sounds like, what the fuck is this? And it's like, all right, I'm going to go buy the merch right now for a little bit.
But then you see Deicide, and they do Sacrificial Suicide, and it's very clearly. I mean, I had a conversation with Steve about this many years ago, and he outright said it. Like we wrote that song, and we wrote most of those early songs, and many of the newer songs they're written totally in service of the live experience. Like we know when we get to the damn to hell in my life, that's the audience is going to get into that. Crazy. Because it's written in a way that it's reasonably simple, but it's simple by design, so that the audience gets into it. They kind of hit the they feel that groove. And I remember seeing Despised Icon once. They were one of the few bands that I'd seen without ever hearing a note of them play, and when they played Retina, you could just tell that whole fucking crowd was getting into it. And same with me. I was like, Jesus, this is incredible. But anyway, that aside, so plans are for 2023, new album in the works. You guys are gonna be going on tour as well. Have you got any shows confirmed for 2023 yet?
Nothing for next year. Just this December show with Pyrexia, Malignancy, Bowel Erosion, and that's all we have on the slate right now.
That's for anyone who might be from the area. December 17th at Rams Pub in Holbrook, New York. Pyrexia, Malignancy, Reeking Aura, Inhuman Devourment, and Bowel Erosion. And then we're going to cap off the year like that. We have a bunch of merch. People might want to, if they want to check for our merch our social media and our Bandcamp. I think after that December 17th show, we're going to try to pawn off a lot of this merch left over that we got made up for that tour we went on with Hath and Carrion Vale and for this show coming up. But beyond that, there's no plans. I think the plan is to double down on writing for the new album. And we're gonna, we've behind the scenes, a few people have offered us things in terms of shows in different locations, and a few promoters and things, like we're talking to people. There's no specific dates or specific locations, but the goal is for 2023, I think, to write, probably record the album as soon as we have the material written, but also we're really trying to get out there. We got a taste for the live experience with that tour we just did. We got high hopes for this Pyrexia Malignancy gig. It's an honor to support those bands. And we're just looking to get as much as we can of that out of state, maybe next year, or it's the St. Vitus Bar, Amityville Music Hall. We love these venues as well, right here in our backyard. So definitely trying to do stuff in 2023. Nothing to report yet.
Yeah, and a little pipe dream is down the line. One of these years, we want to do Reek Fest, where we have all our bands play a huge show, and that's something we've been talking about doing, maybe one of these days. And I could see that maybe happening after album number 2, maybe in 2024 or something. But we're gonna have to get Unearthly Trance out of the mothballs for that one. So
you're gonna also need to get your passport sorted out so you can come over to the UK and play. Get Mike and Tombs to come along with you and New York Invasion in
Grey Skies,
in the UK and in Europe.
Great Skies Fallen was supposed to play with Tombs twice, and both times it was with Evoking and Tombs, and we finally were able to play that show without Tombs. It was just Great Skies and Evoking. I can't believe that's even a year ago. Time is flying by so fast now. But one of these days, we're gonna have to get together with Mike and put that show together, because Tombs is pretty sick. Yeah.
Shout to Mike, man, and I also know Drew from Tombs, a newer recruit to Tombs. But yeah, shout to Mike. A lot of respect for him. And I also have to acknowledge, as my role in the Heavy Hole podcast, Mike is probably one of, if not the pioneer, maybe the standard bearer would be the right word, but for this extreme metal podcasting thing. Mike, in addition to Tombs being its own entity with its own legacy, I remember Mike doing the extreme metal podcasting thing way before I did Heavy Hole, and before a lot of other people started this whole thing. He kind of seemed to be a little bit ahead of the curve with bringing death metal and grindcore and everything else under that umbrella into the podcasting game. So I got to give him his propers. And like we've said on my podcast, there's a lot of people that we wish we could have gotten to sooner in terms of inviting to our platform, but I do have to reach out to him, man, especially knowing that he played a little part in us being here today with you, man. The shout to
one last question, actually, as we're talking about the podcast, what's next for you guys? You're not going to be taking a break over Christmas or anything like that, I'm assuming?
Quite the opposite. 2023, I'll be, if anyone's listening to this by way of maybe knowing my podcast, I will promise them we're doubling down in 2023. People who are supporting us by the way of Patreon, we are going to double down on the content we're putting up there. We're going to step up our game. We owe them more. And people who just listen to the regular weekly episodes, we just put out today, we put out a expedition episode in search of Long Island black metal, because Long Island is kind of known for death metal, suffocation, internal bleeding, so pyrexia, like I talked about, and even nowadays bands. But Long Island is not necessarily world renowned for black metal. So I really had to dig deep, and I found some obscure black metal projects between 1992 was the oldest one, and right up to the 2000 teens, and we're gonna have to do a part 2. But
wow,
all I'm getting at is we're doing research episodes, and we're doubling down on everything, man. We really want to make the Heavy Hole podcast the platform that it has all the potential to be in 2023, man. So, and I can't do it without my team. Again, Rick, you'll hear Rick on the podcast from time to time, co-hosting with me, bringing recommendations to the table and so on and so forth. Sam Sherrick from Wreaking Aura, Terrell from Wreaking Aura, Dave Gladding From Reeking Aura, Tom Anderer, our bass player, Dave Gladding, our session live bass player who helped us out on that tour, and also my co-host on the Heavy Hole podcast from time to time, is a gem for tidbits and lore of Long Island death metal. So all I'm getting at is, we're definitely doubling down with the podcast for 2023. And if people haven't experienced it yet, we pride ourselves in well-researched content related to the underground death metal scene, and a variety of it in terms of age group, genre, geography, and all that.
Badass. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I'm so glad we got to do this finally, and man, very much looking forward to album number 2.
Thanks for having us, and absolutely we'll stay in touch, and hopefully I'll see you in June, because that's when I'll be around.
For sure. All right.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate your support and your compliments throughout the interview, man. Thank you so much for supporting and paying attention to Reeking Aura.
That's a pleasure, man. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Folks, if there's blood pouring out of your ears right about now, that's because partly your headphones are too loud, and secondly, it's because you just listened to Harvesting the Hatchet by Reeking Aura off their fantastic record, Blood and Bonemeal, on Profound Law Records. You can pick that up by heading over to the Bandcamp link that I'll put in the description to the show. Also, make sure that you follow them on the socials, and then check out the Heavy Hole podcast. Really, really good stuff. And who knows, perhaps we will join forces and Heavy Hole will become part of the Horsemen of the Podcast Apocalypse. But what a blast having Rick and having Will on the show. I will definitely try and do something with him again at some point down the road, and looking forward to that second album, because if you go back to my review that I did of this record, I loved it then, I still love it now, and I think I do genuinely believe this band is a group on the ascent. Okay, folks, let's move on now to one of my favorite releases of this past week, and an album that most of you will know I've been looking forward to for a while. That is Veilburner's sixth and self-titled album, which they just unleashed on Transcending Obscurity Records. For the uninitiated, Veilburner are a blackened death metal duo hailing from Pennsylvania. They have been putting out a steady stream of really good music since 2014. I discovered them on one of my news rants, and have since dug into the discography and the back catalog. I also had them both on the podcast back on episode 156, and if you haven't checked that episode out yet, then you definitely need to do so, because the conversation really shed some light on I think their creative process, and really some kind of fascinating insights on some of the lyrics and some of the ideas that they've brought into the band thus far. Now, that being said, even if you are a longtime fan of Veilburner, I think you might potentially find yourself surprised at the degree to which they have dialed up the avant-garde and the off-kilter elements in their sound on this particular record. In fact, I would say on more than one occasion over the course of the several listens I've given it thus far, I kept thinking that it makes their previous record, the excellent Lurkers in the Capsule of Skull, sound positively pedestrian by comparison. The unconventional approach that they take stretches across to pretty much, in my view, every aspect of the sound on the record, whether that's the effects that they use on the guitars to kind of amplify that sense of unease that the dissonant riffing creates, to the way that they use keyboards, to the kind of distinct industrial and noise rock influences that are possibly more prominent on this record than they've ever been on a Veilburner album. I would say even Chrism Infernium's vocal performance takes a leap into, a lot more kind of eccentric and unique territory. On a track like En Vexeminus or Ex Venemus Hex, I'm sure I fucked the pronunciation of that up, by the way, but when you listen to the record, you know which one I'm referring to. He actually sounds positively unhinged. He sounds a little bit, in some ways, I would say he reminds me a bit of Attila, and the performance that he turned in on Mayhem's Ordo at KO. And, as anyone knows who listens to the show, I absolutely love that record, so this is a very good thing. But I would certainly say, whether they intended it or not, when I talk about Ordo at KO, I think there are actually moments on this record that feel as if they share, if nothing else, a similar attitude and a similar mode of being with that particular album. Now, putting that aside, the great thing about Veilburner, particularly on their sixth album, is that as much as they are at times literally throwing the kitchen sink into things creatively, everything that they do feels like it was incorporated and like it was brought in service of the song. And that to me is actually, at the core of this band's growing brilliance, because in my view, an awful lot of bands that or that have attempted this approach tend to kind of fall by the sword of their own self-indulgence, and Veilburner don't allow themselves to go that same way, and instead what we get are 10 atmospheric, unfalteringly impactful, and really enjoyable, invigorating songs. It also means that on this occasion, Veilburner have earned themselves an accolade that many have described as the greatest accolade that anyone can receive in all of music today, and that is a top notch from yours truly. This is about to be demonstrated by the song I'm going to play. This is a track called Repulsed by the Light.
Darkness is cast upon the the shells of our former selves, where the debt of our existence burns as a curse in the garden of Jessamine, where the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. So ask yourself, are we demons of our own creation? Or are we of Christ in the fires of our own damnation? Where the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Whose death serves the night, repulsed by the light.
That was Repulsed by the Light by Veilburner off the self-titled record available right now on Transcending Obscurity Records. Kudos to those guys for putting out an absolutely fantastic album. And they will definitely be back on again in 2023. When I say back on again, I mean back on the podcast in 2023 to talk about most likely their 7th record, given the fact that I think they're now, up to the writing of album number 9, if I'm not mistaken. Either way, these two guys definitely have some very creatively fertile minds, and the black metal world, the extreme metal world, is better off for it. But yeah, great job from them. Make sure that you check out the album, and make sure that if you do buy yourself some music, you use the Bandcamp link in the description to the podcast, and let Mephisto and Chrism know that it was old Jackson at Into the Necrosphere that sent you. Speaking of which, old Jackson is about to send the soy boys running for cover. The weak, the cowardly, and the posers crying behind their mama's skirt, because I'm heading over to Metal Storm for the final, perhaps the most deadly news rant of 2022. Our odyssey begins on Metal Storm, and the first headline to capture my attention: Catatonia have put out a new single called Austerity, and there is a video for it now, premiering online, it says here, as part of their next full-length offering, Sky Void of Stars, due out on January the 20th. The long-standing Swedish metal band Catatonia premiere the second advanced single called Austerity. I liked the first one. I had a lot of feedback from folks saying that I do need to give those records that I had callously written off another chance. I have yet to do so because, frankly, there's been so much good music and so much new stuff coming out that I've needed to listen to. Plus, I need to catch up on a whole bunch of stuff that I have, or that has kind of flown under my radar this year that I've just not had the time. But I am more than willing to give Austerity a listen. So let's get to it. And apparently, whoever edited this together did not get to putting in the typical explosion that precedes a Napalm Records YouTube clip. Be that as it may, who knows? Maybe they were trying to set the tone for something somber and mournful, and they didn't feel like an explosion was appropriate. Anyway, let's get back to it.
I thought things would take off, but they cooled down. Your voice on the phone, I hear traffic behind. Violent rain, outside looking out, fragment of sky.
I like the music video very much. It kind of reminds me a little bit of The Crow, which, by the way, I saw that inexplicably, or actually not inexplicably, because Hollywood is so bankrupt of ideas in the main, that they are now actively trying to remake everything. But I saw that there's a Crow remake on its way, which I can only imagine is going to be fucking terrible. But anyway, getting back to the song, I like the music video. It kind of has a Crow kind of vibe to it. For those of you watching this on YouTube, if you don't, head over to YouTube and do yourself a favor and watch the video. It makes a pleasant change from the usual, people standing in a circle, head banging to nothing, or old man in his underpants running around on the beach. The song itself. There's some interesting melodies there. I think particularly in the verse, in the kind of the build up to the chorus. The chorus itself, I don't know, it's a little bit saccharine, I think is the way to describe it. And maybe I need to listen to it a little bit more for it to make more sense. It's not doing quite as much for me as the first single. I will put it that way. So I'll get back to it. But so far, it's shall I say I'm neutral on this song. I like it. I'm just not blown away by it. But anyway, let's give it another 60 seconds. I really like the way that they've used keyboards in this song. I think it's done in a way that it's subtle, but it's prominent whilst being subtle, if that makes sense. And then I really like that guitar lead as well. I think that sounds really, really cool. So overall, I think good song. Good song, and this is the first Catatonia record in a while that I'm actually reasonably excited about hearing. Even though it appears as though January is going to be relatively packed with good new releases as well, which again, normally when you put out something in January, it can always fly or typically fly under the radar. But secondly, January has always just been a bit of a nothing month as far as music is concerned. That does not seem to be slated for 2023. But solid work from the men in Catatonia. Okay, let's move on. Moonlight Sorcery are streaming a track from their upcoming EP. It says here, melodic black metal purveyors from Finland, Moonlight Sorcery, unleash a new track, Utolten Kutsu, as part of their upcoming EP, Nightwind the Conqueror from the Stars, which will be released via Avantgarde Music on January the 13th, 2023, on CD, LP, tape, and digital. The first 200 LP copies will be numbered and hand-numbered, they say, and will come with an additional poster signed by the full band, presumably in their blood. Unfortunately, the song that they have offered up here is on the Bandcamp embedded player, and considering the tumultuous effect that listening to those songs have had on folks' hearing and their windscreens, I will refrain from listening to it. But what I can say is, if you're not watching this on YouTube, I can see three men in reasonably, shall we say, manicured corpse paint. And I'm not really a big fan of that. I think corpse paint needs to be something that's quite filthy, and it shouldn't look like it was carefully applied by a seasoned makeup artist. These people that have these like really intricate patterns with their corpse paint and stuff. I mean, I think it looks pretty fucking lame, to be honest. If you're gonna do corpse paint, do it like Marduk, where you literally look like you've come straight out of the bowels of hell, and your war paint is smeared as a result of the heat. Anyway, I'll withhold any further shade thrown the way of Moonlight Sorcery, because who knows, they might turn out to be a great band. Speaking of great bands, Obituary present Dying of Everything single. I spoke about him last week, and I will stress Evan Hopper is a dear friend of mine, but he has suggested to me that the last Obituary single was boring. I denounce that comment, and also I denounce it in light of the fact that he also liked the last Metallica single. I didn't think the last Metallica single was bad, but I certainly didn't think it was exciting. That being said, now I kind of almost feel like I need to, like Obituary can't let me down either, because, I've defended their cause against people that, are maybe a little skeptical about them putting out a new record in 2023. I have not heard Dying of Everything just yet, but I did really like that first single. So let's hear what it sounds like. It's obviously off the forthcoming record of the same name. It's due for release on January the 13th via Relapse Records, and we're about to give it a spin. I'm not going to be hypocritical and not call this out after I called Enslaved out over exactly the same thing last week. Donald Hardy is a drummer that is too skilled and too much of a seasoned pro to be fucking around with a boring, lazy drum line like the one that he starts off that song with. I mean, that just sounds bad. It sounds like somebody that could... It sounds like something a fucking, 6-year-old learning the drums would be able to do. And he's a great drummer. I love him. As far as like death metal drummers are concerned, he has a natural groove, and a natural kind of, I would say almost a rock and roll vibe to the way that he plays extreme music that I love and, have always loved. But I'm not feeling it coming through on this song. Definitely not like I did on the previous single, and certainly not like, I've heard it coming through on the very best that Obituary has offered. This song, to me, I must say, is a little bit nondescript. The previous track had not great degrees of experimentation, but there was still something that felt, like it was new Obituary rather than, we could do one of those mashups and very easily stick at least 5 or 6 other Obituary songs into the song, which is kind of what this feels like to me. The new material, I would definitely say, overall has a very Frozen in Time feel to it. And I liked Frozen in Time very much, but it did take me a while to get into it because I initially wrote it off as kind of, very much Obituary just retreading old ground again. It's like AC/DC, they bring out the same album every single time, but for the most part, it's good. It's I would still say, on the positive side, it's better than the Obituary that I've heard, or than what Obituary turned out in the last 2 records. Like I said, I didn't like those, but it's definitely nothing near as good as the first single. But who knows? We might be in for a epic breakdown or something memorable. So let's give it another 60 seconds and let's see what the boys from Florida can churn up.
Growing, wonder as it needs as the words are
right, so it's not doing anything much different to what it's done previously. And by previously, I mean in the preceding minute and 10 seconds. So let's jump to 3 minutes in. And I'm kind of keeping my fingers crossed here that, that they're going to turn up the voltage because, yeah, right now this is all kinds of average. No, I've got to say, it's underwhelming. I think that's the best way to describe it. It's not bad. I know if you saw them live and they played that song, people would love it. It would sound cool. I mean, again, they even managed to make the last two records sound great when they played those songs live. But it is not something that I'm going to put a huge amount of time aside to, do or have dedicated intense listening sessions picking through the finer details and the cleverness of what's been done there, because I don't think that it's particularly clever. I think it feels a bit lazy to me. And the previous song did not feel so, even though I know or at least it seems from some of the feedback I've had that I may be in the minority on that opinion. Which suggests to me that folks are probably going to think this, or those same people are probably going to think this is fucking terrible. Anyway, okay, let's move on. Redoma have just finished recording new music. I've never heard of Redoma before, but it says here they are a Russian black and death metal band. They've just finished recording their second full-length album called Buried in Permafrost. Mixing phase is currently underway. Below you can also check out the album's cover artwork, which was created by Svetlana Kuprikova. Buried in Permafrost, I'm assuming, is what they is what Putin is what he's calling his strategy for Europe this winter. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we've got any music to listen to, so time will tell whether Redoma actually sounds like anything particularly deadly. The Abbey have dropped a new song. Progressive doom rock newcomers The Abbey are revealing a brand new song, Widow's Will, along with a dark and beautiful music video. This is the second single from the band's forthcoming debut record, Word of Sin, due on February the 17th via Season of Mist Records. This is the first song that guitarist-vocalist Jesse Heikkinen wrote for The Abbey. Says the band, Widow's Will is maybe the most straightforward track of the album. It's a love song for death, dedicated to our late loved ones. First single by this band, I liked very much. The music video was reasonably weird. A guy, tied up to a fucking, what looked like some sort of tent peg. And then having a bunch of bare-breasted slatterns running around him, attempting to will him into, or tempt him into sins of the flesh. But, let's see whether or not they can keep it up.
The symmetry of life is like a tower. The symmetry of life is like a tower. It builds towards the heavens from the ground, till one day falls downhill and unsound.
life is like a sound. The symmetry of life is like a sound. It resonates with.
Not as good as the first single, I don't think, but it will definitely have its audience. There's no doubt about that. Perhaps its audience might not include yours truly, or a great many people that listen to Into the Necrosphere. But I guess we'll have to listen to the whole record and decide. Like I said, it's not bad. It's not, it's not quite blowing me away. Okay, let's see. Misfirming, or Misfirming. I don't know how the fuck to pronounce that name. It says here, on December the 16th, black metal entity Misfirming is what I'm going to call them, will put out their third full-length entitled Mayo Homri. Below you can check out other album details as well as a short teaser. Cover artwork created by Manuel Tinemans. I've never heard of this band before, but they describe themselves as authentic and genuine, entirely devoid of gimmicks. Mayo Homri is a celebration of violence and excess. Arrogant, vitriolic, and with contemptuous disregard for your every sensibility, this album is our statement against all that is false and vain in today's underground scene. With the timeless values of true metal woven into its very fabric, unironic and unapologetic, this is the devil's music made manifest. There is plenty of room for nuance and subtlety in black metal, but the hammer leaves no room for interpretation. That is fucking brilliant. Let's hope the music follows suit. A pretty poignant teaser. Actually, and I mean that sincerely. I think that sounds fucking cool. I'm just impressed by the way that they describe the record. The hammer leaves no room for interpretation. I'm not going to lie. If you see that turn up on an Into the Necrosphere t-shirt when I relaunch that Teespring store next year, don't be surprised. I think that's fucking brilliant. And I'm going to have to check out this band. I like the sound of it. Okay, we move on. Udonde, I think is how you pronounce this. Again, what is with these fucking weirdo, I guess not weirdo because it's just different languages, but good lord, it's fucking difficult to pronounce some of these things. Anyways, so ahead of tomorrow's official album release, Slow Death, a celebration of self-hatred, the atmospheric black metal one-man band Udonde offer in listening the entire effort of 8 songs. This is released, and they don't mention it here for some reason, but it's released on Vendetta Records. And unless senility has already started to eat away at my brain, I believe Vendetta Records were also responsible for releasing the fantastic Ultha record, which came out at the beginning of the year. And that is a very, very strong contender for the vaunted top 30 of 2022, which I will count down at the beginning of next year. But anyway, let's listen to this. There's no single, but we'll give the beginning of the album a quick spin and see what Udonde is all about. So obviously we're busy listening to an intro. I'm going to skip to one of the other tracks on the record in a second. But what I would say is, I always admire bands that are able to say a lot with very little. You know, and obviously we don't want an entire record that sounds like that, but I think you guys know what I mean. It's like when you're able to craft a sequence in a song, or an intro, or an instrumental, or an interlude, or whatever you want to call it, where you can express an awful lot with very, very few notes, and it's more about the nuance and the subtlety that you weave into how long you let a note ring out for. How the notes are sequenced. To me, that's just I love it. I think there's a real art to that, and I hence why I bring it up, because I think that intro is done really, really well. So I hope that the music follows suit. We're jumping now to track 3. Which is a track called "And Denied All Sense and Reason," but I'm liking what I'm hearing so far. So far, so good. I like the production. I suspect he's using a drum machine, but it sounds cool, or at least programmed drums. The guitar sound good. That riff is badass. The question now is whether or not the vocals cut the mustard, because vocals, in my opinion, especially when it comes to, actually not especially, but in black metal, it can definitely make or break a band. So let's here's hoping. Hell yes. No, this is fucking cool. Great stuff. Slow Death, a celebration of self-hatred. The band Udonde. I will definitely check that out. A whole lot more. But what I've heard so far sounds fucking badass. Okay. Next, we've got Necrot, who are streaming Reich der Gier single. Extreme metal unit Necrot are pleased to share their newest music piece. The Reich der Gier single, recorded by Jeffrey Ullman. Mixing and mastering was once again done by Bjorn Fromberger, and the accompanying music video was created by Marcus Siebel. No idea what Necrot sounds like, but they got Necro in the title, so I feel that given the name of my podcast, I kind of owe it to them to at least give them a chance. if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll know what I'm talking about. When the song started and I saw the sweeping drone footage of a castle, something inside of me said, they're going to have an old man in his underpants. And sure enough, there's an old man in his underwear looking to have what seems like a epileptic fit or a nervous breakdown as part of the accompanying visuals of the song. And so far, we're 22 seconds in, but I am underwhelmed. I take that back. It's not an old man. It's the band's vocalist. Apparently just made up to look old. Either that or my eyesight's going. Actually, I have to also say, when the vocals kick in and you've got that little clean guitar line in the back, the song definitely goes from being pretty pedestrian to actually being pretty goddamn interesting. So let's get back to it. I take back what I said about it being rubbish. I didn't say it was rubbish. I just said I wasn't particularly impressed at the start. It's actually very good. Very, very good. My only concern for Necrotted now is that you're going to get a whole bunch of fucking dweebs on metal Twitter going, they've got Reich in their name. That's clearly a white nationalist dog whistle. I'm sure the Necrotted guys won't give a shit, though. But yeah, like I said, not bad at all. I will for sure check out the band a bit more when I have a chance. And also, kudos to Marcus Zabel for the job that he did on that music video, because I am going to assume the fact they've not mentioned any record label means this is independent, and the music video wasn't bad at all. It's not like Spirit World level of production. But whatever it does hide by way of, I should say, whatever it does hide by way of lack of budget, it does so very, very well. Okay, let's move on. Obscura to tour North America with Fleshguard Apocalypse, two bands that I think are so extraordinarily overrated. It's almost astonishing. I think Obscura are boring as fuck. And I think that Fleshguard Apocalypse is... there are Fleetwood Mac songs that I find to be more threatening and more menacing than anything that band have ever written. And by the way, I'm just going to throw this out there. I know this is an extreme metal podcast, but I was sad when I heard about Christine McVie passing away. I know she's 79, had a good innings. Probably an innings that lasted a little longer than the cocaine use of the 70s that she indulged in might otherwise have suggested that it should. But Fleetwood Mac is just a band that's grown on me over the years. Maybe it's a sign of old age, but you when you go to hi-fi shows, it's one of the bands that you hear continually, and I think they just wore me down. But they've got some fucking great songs. So condolences to her and or to her nearest and dearest. Portuguese death doom metal band Oak, featuring members of Guerrilla, are proud to announce the arrival of their second full-length and Season of Mist debut, Disintegrate. The album will be released worldwide on the 23rd of February 2023. The first single is due out next week. Stay tuned. Very nice album cover. Of course, like I said, big fan of Guerrilla. And looking at these two gentlemen, they don't look like the new metal mascots that were on the social media posting that was going around, where people were essentially saying, because of the way that Guerrilla dress, they are false, and you are therefore false by extension for listening to them. Which to me is kind of like people that go, or people that clutch their pearls and want to have want to take some sort of grand moral stand against celebrities wearing metal t-shirts. It is childish. It is fucking stupid. And if you engage in that kind of thing, you need to stop it. All right, we move on, my friends. Wedding Goth, or Weeding Goth, a French progressive metal collective, not black metal collective, unveiled details in connection with the release of their next long player entitled 5 Stars Above. It'll land in stores on January the 10th. The fact that they call themselves Weeding Goth, or like I said, is it Weeding Goth or Wedding Goth? It's 1D, so I'm assuming it's going to be Weeding Goth. It's the fucking stupidest name I've heard for a band in a long time. And sadly, they don't have any music there, because I would almost imagine that the music will follow suit. Atrocity have unveiled a new single as part of their soon-to-be-released studio record. Occult 3, Germans Atrocity, have set aside their BDSM bondage gear and launched another new single called Faces from Beyond. I should say set aside their BDSM bondage gear and rediscovered their death metal roots, because this is a long way away from the Euro trash goth metal that they've been making for quite a while now. Occult 3 is due on January the 20th via Massacre Records, and actually I will say, they've put out, I think, 3 singles off this record, and the first and second were not bad. Surprisingly so. I wasn't sure that Alexander Krull would still have it in him, but I know that he and Liv Christine, the woman who used to be his wife, and she used to sing for Theatre of Tragedy, I think they went and did something solo. I don't know what she does with her time now. She might have been in a band called Leaves End. Either way, shit music for men that wear cravats. But anyway, the reason I bring this up is I'm wondering whether he's not rediscovered his anger because of the terms of their divorce. Maybe the fucking spousal maintenance charges that he's been hitched with is a little much for old man Krull to bear. Either way, let's hear what Faces from Beyond sounds like.
Dimension
I know I've let this run on a little bit longer than I normally would do, and the reason for that is because I can't make up my mind whether I like this or not. It's not bad, but then I come back to, I've spoken a lot about how the bar has been raised for black metal, but it has most definitely been raised for death metal as well. Case in point being the gentleman that I interviewed on today's podcast. You cannot listen to that song and compare it to the new Reeking Aura record. I'm very sorry, it's not in the same ballpark whatsoever. So yeah, it's not bad, but it's definitely not as good as the first two singles. And I don't necessarily see. I mean, is there a massive clamor from the death metal fans out there to hear a new Atrocity death metal record? I'm not really sure that there is. Destroyer 666 upcoming album Never Surrender streaming in full. That of course also got released this past Friday. It is a superb album. If you like Destroyer 666, you will love it. If you like thrash metal with a splash of black, it is definitely right up your street. And I'm very sorry, but if I hear a single person say that the new Metallica is great but the new Destroyer 666 is rubbish, then you need to get your fucking hearing checked. I mean, this is Riff City. The songs are completely and utterly badass from start to finish. You know, and the thing that I love most about it is that, once again, they do not shy away from lyrics that will make the woke gang on Twitter clutch their pearls, you know, wave their little flags and, you know, scream for mercy at the sound of it. Anyways, let's move on. We've actually got a fair bit to talk about on the Democrats' Guide to Rock Music as well. Not limited to the fact that Pantera played their first show last night. So I'm recording this on the year of our Lord, 2022, December the 3rd. And last night was the first Pantera show in many, many years. As a matter of fact, it doesn't look like there's anything else here aside from a band who have inexplicably in 2022 decided to call themselves Metal Steel. which I mean, fucking hell, if they're not like a Steel Panther joke band, then what is the world coming to? Let's cast all of that nonsense aside because we want to see what the buzz is on this new Pantera concert footage. So it says here, watch Pantera play first concert in over 20 years at Mexico's Hell and Heaven Metal Fest. It says here, Pantera has just taken the stage at Mexico's Hell and Heaven Metal Fest. The show, which marks the band's first full performance in 20 years, features Pantera's reformed lineup consisting of surviving members Rex Brown and Philip Anselmo, along with guitarist Zach Wilde and drummer Charlie Benante. The first video and photos of the concert can be found below. More footage and pictures will be added as the night progresses. The set list looks reasonably spicy. They started off with A New Level, which is a superb song. Then they went straight into Mouth for War. Then they said, let's not let these motherfuckers start slacking, and they went into Strength Beyond Strength, Becoming, I'm Broken, Use My Third Arm, Drag the Waters, This Love, Yesterday Don't Mean Shit, Fucking Hostile, Planet Caravan, 5 Minutes Alone, Cowboys from Hell, Domination, and Walk, which is good. They're missing Slaughtered. They are also missing, in my opinion, Hardlines and Sunken Cheeks, although I know they never really played that song very much live. Regular People, my favorite Pantera song, that is absent as well, as is By Demons Be Driven. And no Primal Concrete Sledge. Very surprised at the omission of that one. But let's hear what some of these videos sound like. It says here, it was first reported in July that Anselmo and Brown would unite with Wilde and Benante for a world tour under the Pantera banner, sparking a battle amongst keyboard warriors everywhere over whether or not the reunion is legit. This from people who themselves have never been in a band, or whatever band they're in has never drawn more than a few flies to a pile of steaming dog shit. And yet they somehow decided that they're going to be moral arbiters of Pantera, and whether or not the surviving members of Pantera are allowed to tour and make any money off the band they put in several years worth of work. Anyway, let's check out some of these clips. So we've got a clip here of Walk. Seems like whoever was filming this was reasonably close to the stage, or About as close to the stage as you can get, probably without getting your phone and face smashed in for recording something. So let's hear what this sounds like. It's always hard making a judgment when you see videos like that, because I mean, as I'm listening to this, one thing that I know, and I'm sure you guys will agree with me, when you take mobile phone footage at a concert, it will always show off the very worst, not mistakes, but like all of the weaknesses of somebody's voice, which is why when sometimes you see like old cell phone footage of Warrell Dane as an example, I mean, I'm fucking blown away by just how good he sounds, even when you've got something that's going to expose him in that way. I think Phil sounds reasonable. I think the bit where he says, I think it's where he says a lesson learned in life. I mean, he kind of seems to lose the note a little bit there. But this is at the end of a show, and the guy is 53 years old, and Pantera's vocals are reasonably taxing. I mean, I don't give a fuck how much he's practiced. It'll be tough to pull off. Zach sounds pretty decent. I'm curious to hear what the guitar solo is going to sound like. So because Walk's guitar solo to me is one of the very best of the best. So I'm curious to hear whether he pulls that off. Whoever was doing the clean vocal around the chorus should not ever be allowed to do clean vocals again. It sounded terrible. And I'm going to have to come out and say this, but I did raise the specter when this reunion was first announced, that Charlie Benante was possibly not the best choice to take the drums. He's a good drummer. Don't get me wrong. He's a very, very good drummer. I think the work he's done on Anthrax has been very good. Work he did for SOD is excellent. But it's a different style of drumming to Pantera. Pantera needs a groove. There needs to kind of be somebody with a natural flair for groove when they play. And as I'm listening to this, what I'm not hearing is that. I kind of feel like I feel my initial impressions are this is Walk with cement shoes on. If you guys know what I'm driving at. And again, maybe this is a case of just the mix coming through this guy's phone. I mean, it's a fucking tiny little microphone, so this isn't exactly a pro recording. So maybe the mix coming through the phone is just not giving me what people that were there were getting. But to me, those drums just aren't up to par. I would have taken a drummer like Igor Cavallero, who genuinely does have that kind of groove, seemingly mainlined into his fucking DNA. Charlie Benante, I'm not sure if his drumming works, but maybe, I don't know, maybe he was tired. End of the night. Let's see if he wakes up as the song progresses.
What do you say? Yeah.
I think that the clean vocal that I heard might have been somebody in the crowd, because I can also hear a bunch of people blathering next to the person who's recording this. Again, whoever it was in the crowd, don't sing ever again. Let's move on to... I'm going to skip forward so we can get to the solo. That wasn't bad. It wasn't note perfect, but I mean, you know, again, that's kind of in a way you don't want it to be note perfect, because that wasn't the way that Dime, I think, played these solos. These solos had a very natural, organic flair to them. You know, it kind of sounded like he was making that shit up on the spot. I mean, he really, to me, is a guitarist that when he picked up a guitar, I think the beauty of what he did was, you know, and there are very few men and women that can claim this when it comes to whatever instrument that they're playing, but the beauty of what he did was it felt to me when he picked up a guitar and he was at his best, like he was a dude who literally just had music coming out, shooting out of his fingers. There was a spontaneity to the way that he played. There was a spontaneity to the riffs, to the solos. It sounded like it was just natural. It was a natural extension of him as a musician. And I think in order to be able to do that, you need to have just absolutely extraordinary command of your instrument. I mean, there's no doubt about that. You know, the only other people that I think, you know, will immediately come top of mind when I think of people that I think have reached that level. So Matt Pike from High on Fire. You know, when you listen to a song like Brother in the Wind, you see them play that song live as an example. I mean, it really kind of feels like it's just, you know, it's just emotion turned into riffs that comes out of the dude. Trey from Morbid Angel, definitely. You know, especially on an album like Formulas Fatal to the Flesh. I would definitely say Matt Wilcock has got to that point now as well. Matt Wilcock, of course, of Werewolves and the Antichrist Imperium. I feel like on the last Werewolves record, especially, that definitely comes out. You know, there's like, you know, and again, that may have to do as much with the way those records were written as it has with just the way that he plays. But he's kind of got to a place where he has he's got a signature playing style that just sounds like it flows from him naturally. And I mean, you know, let's be honest, that is just about the highest compliment that I can give somebody. Now, are we going to check out another clip before we move on to something else? Yeah, let's do that. So here's one for Mouth for War, was it not? Anyways, who gives a fuck? Let's give this a minute and then we'll move on. Yeah, I think that sounds pretty good. And, you know, to all the folks that are out once again sobbing about how, you know, Dime and Vinny would never have agreed to this, and this is just a cash grab, you probably wouldn't have been able to afford a ticket anyway. So, you know, this was not a show for you. It's not a show that you were forced or obligated to go to. It certainly seems to me like plenty of people that were there were having a fucking great time. Okay. We move on. Axl Rose responds to Guns N' Roses fans' microphone injury claim. It says here, Axl Rose has responded to an Australian woman's claim that she was hit in the face by the singer's microphone during Guns N' Roses concert in Adelaide on Tuesday, November the 29th. The alleged incident happened while Rose and his bandmates were performing the final song of their set, Paradise City. At the end of the track, the singer launched the microphone into the crowd, allegedly hitting the woman in the face. The woman, who suffered bruises on her face, told ABC, "I was just putting out a warning for people. If Axl sings Paradise City, get ready to duck for cover." She added, "My intentions were not to gain anything." I can tell you right now, in many other countries, old Axl would have had a lawsuit thrown at him faster than he could say, "Welcome to the jungle." The woman told the Adelaide advertiser, the mic hit her on the bridge of the nose. She said an off-duty policeman pulled her aside after she was struck and took care of her and attempted to stop the bleeding from her nose. "I was in shock and hyperventilating," she claimed. "My mind went, oh my God, my face has caved in." Is there a photo of her? Yes, there is. That looks pretty goddamn nasty. When you get your nose fucked up, and I've known this from all the MMA I watched, it has this weird effect where it like makes your eyes really puffy and bruised up as well. Yeah, she definitely looks like she took a bit of a blow. But I don't know whether or not this is going to turn into a lawsuit of some sort. But were I standing in front, I can tell you I wouldn't have been there because I don't like Paradise City, and I would have left. So that is, to me, like I like Appetite for Destruction very much, but there is more, like in totality, there are more great songs on the Use Your Illusion records, which, you know, it's also significantly a lot longer. It's a double album. Than there are songs I like on Welcome to the Jungle. And Welcome to the Jungle, there are a couple, like maybe 5-6 songs that I absolutely love, and then there's stuff that I just think of is complete filler. I think Night Train is a fucking terrible song. I think Paradise City is a load of shit. I think Sweet Child of Mine is unlistenable. I mean, it again, I'd verge on listening to Silence before I listen to that song. So those are songs I could, you know, frankly, I wish they had never recorded. I know it made them very famous, but that being said, doesn't matter to me. If they played Paradise City, I would have turned around and gone home. got out of the parking lot early. All right. Sons of Iron Maiden's Yannick Gers and Radiohead's Tom York release new collaborative single Red Skies. It says here, Dylan Gers, the son of Iron Maiden guitarist Yannick Gers, has teamed up with Noah York, the son of Radiohead frontman Tom York, on a new collaborative single, Red Skies. Now available on all streaming platforms through independent record label Slytone, the track is set to feature a more textured and more detailed approach than Dylan's first single, Moonrise, which came out in April. It starts with a lone acoustic accompanied by a flanger, phaser, and reverb, playing a melody which captures your attention straight away. Then moments later, harmonics which weave in and out to illustrate tension. A 12-string guitar played by Noah is then heard to the rest of this piece of music. Once again, who writes these fucking grammatically challenged PR pieces? Seriously, this is, I mean, like, I feel bad sometimes reading them because I'm reading them as they're on the screen. It's the first time I'm reading them. I don't pre-rehearse this fucking segment, and I end up sounding like a goddamn imbecile because I'm trying to make sense of the drivel that they have submitted as a press release. Anyway. I'm curious to hear this, actually, because I mean we've now listened this year to a couple of different sons acts, or kids of famous musicians acts, including Tokyo Houston or whatever the hell they're called, absolutely abysmal. And then of course there is Corey Taylor's son's band, Slipknot Jr. So let's listen to what Dylan Gers sounds like. Even though Iron Maiden is not my favorite band, Yannick Gers is an incredible guitarist, no doubt about that. And, Tom York, I'm not ashamed to say, he's a guy who unfortunately doesn't have enough people telling him or curating the content that he puts out and saying maybe the song is not good enough. So he puts out a load of shit, but when he puts out good stuff, he is really good. And that's true of Radiohead, and it's true of his solo material. Like, when he's on form, he's really on form. So let's hear what his young'un has managed to conjure up on this track. Apparently, when you play it, oh, there we go. was about to say, I hit play, and for some fucking stupid reason, it just skipped to the very end of the song. So, that technical hiccup aside, let's get back to it.
You're watching the road twist and twine, my lord. Seeing that rain drip upon that stone. You see, I'll die for love. Wedding night for you.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And I know maybe I might be in the minority on this one. It's not, I mean, it's not necro, it's not grim, it's not true or cult, and it's certainly not brutal. I think that sounds fucking great. I absolutely love it. And I'll tell you what, Noah York, he knows his way around a fucking 12-string. I mean, that sounds very, very good. This is hi-fi music. I definitely want to listen to this on my system because I think it would sound really, really good. But good vocals, just good song. It sounds very cinematic, which is I think partly why I like it. By the way, I know I don't. I know I said I'm going to save year best lists for next year, but I can tell you guys, unless something absolutely insane comes out between now and the end of the year, my top 5 favorite movies. Let's make it top 6 favorite movies of 2022 are as follows. Number 1, All Quiet on the Western Front, which I think is one of the best war movies released since Downfall. Number 2, The Banshees of Inisherin, featuring, in my opinion, Colin Farrell's greatest performance. The guy who produced the movie also did In Bruges, and he did 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. I think this is his masterpiece as a filmmaker. I think this is going to be like Paul Thomas Anderson with There Will Be Blood. I'm not sure he's going to do anything that's better than that. Number 3 is Pearl, which is a film that completely caught me by surprise. I loved X, but this is something completely different and just absolutely fantastic from start to finish. I've mentioned this before, but if Mia Goth is not nominated for an Oscar for this movie, then we know that the fucking Oscar Academy is controlled by the Illuminati. I mean, some whack shit is going to have to be going on for her not to be recognized for what is, in my opinion, maybe the greatest single performance by a woman I've seen in a film since Toni Collette in Hereditary, maybe even since Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs. So just absolutely fucking incredible. At number 4, I would say The Northman, which is absolutely amazing. So well done, like from a stylistic perspective. I think it's just absolutely incredible. And then number 5, I would say, is The Batman. My favorite Batman movie of all time. Not including Joker, because I think Joker is the best by far. But my favorite Batman film ever, I expected 0. I don't like superhero movies, generally speaking. But I just thought they nailed it. They nailed the feeling of Batman and the feel that I always had from reading the Batman comics as a young boy, in a way that I don't think any of the movies have done, including the Nolan trilogy. And then number 6, I would say, is Barbarian, which I really, really loved. They spoke about it on Necromaniacs not long ago. And they, I think, gave it a very fair and, very, very measured kind of review. But they also highlighted, I think, a lot of the stuff going on under the surface of the film, which I think they were spot on about. And yeah, I think it's a great movie. Runner-up or honorary mention, X. Ty West is just in absolutely fine form at the moment. But yeah, I mean, I'm not. I don't get as excited about movies as I used to because there's just not as much coming out that I'm interested in anymore. But in my view, if you are short of movies to watch over the Yuletide season, then you can't go wrong with any of those that I've just mentioned now if you have not seen them yet. All right, shall we do one or two more and then wrap this up? Twisted Sister launches makeup collection. Rock and Roll Beauty has announced the release of the Twisted Sister limited edition beauty collection. Known for its outrageous glam rock style and rebellious heavy metal music, Twisted Sister rose to superstardom thanks to their hit music videos, while their rousing live shows cemented their legacy. Through a unique collaboration with Twisted Sister, the licensing agent Epic Rights, and the design team at Rock and Roll Beauty comes this brash and unique color cosmetic collection. Blah, blah, fucking blah. I don't really give two shits about this. But what I would say, as much as I think that Dee Snider is a dusty old fart who knows maybe 10% as much as thinks he does, when it comes to live shows, Twisted Sister are actually pretty fucking good. If you go back and you check out their Big Hits and Nasty Cuts Greatest Hits collection, there's a live show that they did at the Marquee in London as kind of the second disc. Listen to Tear It Loose, Run for Your Life, the songs that they included on there. There's real kind of edge. There's like a real menace to those songs, especially Run for Your Life. Again, like I said, you can say whatever you want about the band. I don't like Dee Snider, and I don't necessarily care for the band, but live they brought it. Yeah, there's a reason why they became as big as they became. Okay, let's see if there's anything else to have a gander at, and then we'll finish up. Ville Valo, after John Bonham, Lars Ulrich is probably one of the most important drummers. So in a new interview with Australia's Heavy, former HIM frontman Ville Valo weighed in on Metallica's 2004 documentary, Metallica Some Kind of Monster, which followed the legendary metal band through the three most turbulent years of their long career, during which they battled through addiction, lineup changes, fan backlash, personal turmoil, and the near disintegration of the group, while making possibly one of the worst records of all time, Saint Anger. He said, as transcribed by Blabbermouth, "To be honest with you, Metallica can do whatever they want to do after the great albums they've made. And they were trying to survive as well, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a ton of bands who've gone through very similar things. But Metallica, for whatever reason, chose to do it in public. I think that's the main thing that is the issue here. I am a bit shy, or I don't want to draw too much attention to myself, as we Finns usually, it's the way we are, a bit hermit-like," he explained. I don't know where the fuck that accent or that imitation came from. I don't even know what he sounds like when he speaks, but I just thought it was funny. Anyway, so it feels so weird, the whole Metallica thing, when it came out, because actually I'm not even going to carry on because I'm gonna crack myself up laughing like that. Anyway, so he says he took his Metallica praise even further, saying that he loves Lars Ulrich. He thinks after John Bonham, Lars is probably one of the most important drummers. He has such a recognizable style. I don't agree with that whatsoever. I think Lars is definitely an important figure in metal. I mean, there's no doubt about that. You know, you can say what you will about Metallica, you can say what you will about Lars, but he's a very important, very influential figure in metal. No doubt about that. Is he the most important drummer? Absolutely fucking not. I think maybe he's a guy who has inspired a lot of kids to pick up the drums over the years because they got into Metallica. But if you just think about the big four, I mean, I would say Nick Menza was a better drummer than what he was, and Dave Lombardo, I mean, fucking forget about it. And then you've got you've got a whole host of other drummers, just kind of in the rock scene, that I think are more important and have had a bigger influence on drumming generally. And again, getting back to Dave Lombardo, I think Dave Lombardo's drumming, has a far wider reaching influence than Lars. I think Lars is or certainly was a competent drummer. He's still a competent drummer, but if you watch that show that they did at Download in the UK in 2004, where I think Lars wasn't able to make it. He was on a coke binge or something and couldn't catch a plane in time. So they had Joey Jordison, Dave Lombardo, and a couple of other folks fill in on the drums. And I'm not going to lie, but I think objectively speaking, those Metallica songs all sounded better for Lars's absence and those songs being played by a decent drummer. That's my view. Might not be the most popular view, but I think that that it's my opinion, and which is what the news rant is all about. So, folks, on that note, I am going to wrap it up for this week. So, folks, as we head into the Yuletide, allow me to tell you all a very quick Christmas story. In 2002, I came to the UK with £500 in my wallet and a dream to become a host of a show of my very own on a shitty little station based out of London called Total Rock FM. I tracked down a guy by the name of Tony Wilson, who was the station manager, and after several calls and emails, none of them harassing, very polite, he agreed to let me send him a compilation of the best bits of the radio show that I hosted in South Africa called The Inferno, and he would take it under advisement. So after about 6 weeks, he came back to me, and it was a very gruff email that read, Jackie, you're not Total Rock material. And I must be honest with you, that stuck in my craw for a very, very long time. It was a demon that, over the course of 2 decades, I felt like I needed to vanquish at some point. And I will definitely say, I feel like in 2022, I have been able to do that by most observable measures, whether it's social media engagement, whether it's views of recent YouTube videos, mine compared to theirs. And I would wager a pretty healthy bet on the fact that my monthly downloads exceed the number of listeners they have. I feel that demon has been defeated, and there is no way in a million years that I would have been able to do that without the Into the Necrosphere legions. Whether it's folks that share podcast content, whether it's, the several of you who have, posted about the show either over the course of the year or kind of included it in your year best lists. I'm so touched and I'm so humbled by the support that this podcast has had. And I hope you know how much it has meant to me. So I want to call out a couple of folks, if you'll indulge me to do so. First of all, obviously, I want to say thanks to the Horsemen, my brothers in the podcast apocalypse. I want to say thank you to Katie Rosari, Cheyenne, Luke Thornley, Matt Wilcock, Nathan Glover, Evan Hopper, Marco of Stellarmaster Elite, Razor Eater Metal, Mark Morris, Scott Bamford, James Moore, Tim Hall, Lewis Barrett, Lily Bruisum, Planet A, BJJ, I should say, not BVJ, Yona Kunda, A Million Worms, Costas, Trianta Felidis, I hope I've done your surname justice, Costa Margarita, Crystal Iceman, Zachary Siebert, Lucia Masip, Overton Souza, Dave of Reduce Right, Wayne Stokely, Jezebel Revenge, and I'm pretty sure I've missed off a couple of folks, but those are the people that are, at least in my mind, the most prolific when it comes to sharing podcast content, and have really been a boost to me when I've needed it. I mean, I confessed, obviously, on a couple of episodes ago, I very nearly stopped this podcast on episode 30, but it was, the folks that dropped me a line to tell me how much they enjoy it and how much it meant to them that made me carry on. So from my perspective, we've done this together in 2022. We are going to continue to go forth and conquer in 2023, and I'm so excited about what the future holds for us. So I want to say once again, thank you very much. However you decide to spend these holidays, I hope that you have a good one. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see you bad motherfuckers again in 2023.